Chapter 735. Radiant Arts 3. From the 9th and 14th Elder, Jianchen gained a better understanding of the distribution of power in the City of God. Within the City of God, the most powerful clan was the Tsar family. The City of God, one of the 7 capitals of the continent, was completely controlled by the Tsar family. Without any exaggerating, the Tsar family are the rulers of the City of God, as well as one of the 3 clans that controlled the empire. Beneath the Tsar family, there were 8 great clans. The 8 clans were all extremely strong, possessing strength no lower than hermit clans, while some of them even possessed strength that superseded several hermit clans. The Chung family was one of the 8 clans. As for the Lei family that had disagreements with Jianchen when he was on the road, they were only a rather well-known clan in the city, a secondary force. There were plenty of clans like this, though a great portion of them were subsidiaries to the 8 clans. Seeing the shock on Jianchen's face, Feng Jianming was secretly delighted. He said with a smile, "Sir Yang Yutian has guessed correctly. Mr. Chung indeed belongs to the Chung family of the 8 clans, and in the clan, Mr. Chung hold a very high position. I must apologize. I will be going to the Radiant Saint Tower to practice radiant arts soon. I won't have the time for quite some time. So please transfer my message to him, that I appreciate his kind intentions, but I perhaps won't be able to attend the ferry on Fragrance River in 2 days' time." Jianchen clasped his hands at Feng Jianming and said calmly. Feng Jianming was slightly surprised. He had never thought that after declaring that he was from the Chung family, one of the 8 clans, Yang Yutian would reject him so flatly. It had caused him some surprise. Although the invitation was rejected, Feng Jianming did not become unhappy even in the slightest. He clasped his hands at Jianchen. Since Sir Yang Yutian needs to go to the Radiant Saint Tower to practice radiant arts, Feng Jianming will not interrupt Sir anymore. Sir, Feng Jianming's mission is now accomplished, and will now report back to Mr. Chung. Farewell. After he finished what he was saying, he turned around to the shadow behind him. His expression immediately became cold. "Shadow, I hope you won't forget the rules set down by the Union. If you break it, you won't be able to escape punishment even with your clan supporting you. You probably will even die." Feng Jianming, that's none of your business." The husky voice sounded from within the black mist, filled with cold intent. The corner of Feng Jianming's lips curled into a sneer. "The esteemed Sir Yang Yutian is Mr. Cheng's guest, as well as an esteemed guest of the Chung family. If anything happens to Sir Yang Yutian, you should know the outcome, Shadow." With that, Feng Jianming turned around and left. Feng Jianming. From within the black mist, there was the sound of grinding teeth. The person shrouded in dark mist clearly dreaded the big bald man. Jianchen glanced at the angry black mist and said indifferently, "Sir, please leave my room, I need to rest." Within Jianchen's indifferent gaze, an undetectable killing intent flickered about. If it were not for that fact that he needed to hide his identity as a fighter in the City of God, how would he let a mere heaven saint master at so brashly before him? The person shrouded in black mist snorted coldly, before leaving unwillingly. Originally, he carried the notion that if Jianchen did not want to go with him, he would just forcefully take him away. However, after arguing with Feng Jianming, he did not dare to do that anymore. On that night, Jianchen was destined to fail to rest peacefully. After the bald Feng Jianming and Shadow left, there were plenty more people who went to the inn to look for the resting Jianchen. Their intentions were all the same, without any exceptions, to represent their masters and wish of inviting Jianchen to their clans as a guest. However, Jianchen wriggled out of all of them, declining every single one. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. In those 3 days, Jianchen had basically gone to every famous store in the city under Lin Bai's lead, but the outcome was disappointing. He failed to find even a single material to craft the azulite swords. In that period of time, people from the 8 clans constantly went to find Jianchen, to take the initiative and get on Jianchen's good side. They also spared no trouble to invite Jianchen to their clans as a guest. However, a few arrogant people from the 8 clans looked down on Jianchen, speaking to him intransigently. However, not only did they fail to get what they wanted, they were met with a cold shoulder. Although Jianchen was an outsider, a person with no right or power in the city of God, as long as he used his identity as a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master, he did not even need to fear the 8 famous clans. Other than the 8 great clans, there were even a few second-rate clans who went and displayed goodwill to Jianchen. The second-rate clans were not as intransigent, treating Jianchen respectfully and extremely courteously. 3 days later was also the day when Jianchen would go to the Union to participate in the ceremony of becoming a core member, before going into the Radiant Saint Tower to learn radiant arts. On that day, he bid farewell to Lin Bai rather early, before calling a luxurious carriage towards the Union. Jianchen sat in the jolting carriage, as he fed several thousand-year, heavenly resources to the white tiger. Right now, he could feel that the tiger had already reached the peak of Class 5, akin to a human 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. With the increase of strength, the speed at which the tiger absorbed heavenly resources also increased. Right now, it could consume a dozen or so thousand-year heavenly resources in one go, no longer needing to sleep to absorb the medicinal effects. Xiaobai, looks like it's not long before you break through Class 5 and become a Class 6 magical beast. Jianchen mumbled to the small white tiger with a soft gaze. MRRRR. The tiger, who was wolfing down the heavenly resources, seemed to be able to understand what Jianchen was saying. It gave out a few slurry cries, while a complacent light appeared in its eyes. Seeing that, Jianchen smiled. The tiger was a winged tiger god, and the intelligence it possessed was extremely rare in magical beasts, as it possessed self-consciousness. At this moment, it possessed the intelligence similar to an 11-year-old child despite being only Class 5. The carriage shot down the wide streets, and arrived very quickly at the main entrance of the Union. When Jianchen left the carriage, a female in long white robes immediately arrived before him. Quickly glancing at the blue badge of Jianchen's chest, she immediately bowed deeply to Jianchen. Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, are you perhaps Master Yang Yutian? Jianchen examined the female. She was around 20 years of age with fine features, and was rather pretty. On the right side of her protruding chest, there was an orange badge, indicating the identity of a Class 2 Radiant Saint Master. I am Yang Yutian. What is it? Jianchen asked indifferently. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am the 5th Elder's attendant. I've come under the orders of the 5th Elder to await for Master Yang Yutian's arrival. Sir, please follow me. I will take you to go see the 5th Elder. Jianchen followed the female into the Union. This time, Jianchen was directly brought to the 3rd story of the castle, before being led into a beautifully decorated room. The room was very large, and was full of extravagant decor. In the center of the room was a cushion, where a ruddy old man sat. The old man sat with his eyes closed, in a way where he seemed like an old monk. On the old man's chest was a shiny purple badge, indicating that he was a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Esteemed 5th Elder, Master Yang Yutian has arrived. The female bowed respectfully to the old man. You can leave, the old man said. Yes, 5th Elder. The female left with gently steps, before closing the door behind her. Yang Yutian greets the 5th Elder. Jianchen clasped his hands at the old man. Although his tone was courteous, he carried no respectful expression. The 5th Elder slowly opened his eyes. The moment they opened, the rays of light in the room seemed to grow bright. In the next moment, the 5th Elder's bright eyes seemed to become the only thing in the room, as if there was a whole separate world in his eyes. In the moment he saw the Elder's eyes, Jianchen's eyes became slightly lost. The 5th Elder's gaze contained the world, but was also as profound as the vast night sky. It actually caused Jianchen to become involuntarily lost within it. However, Jianchen returned to his senses very soon. A sliver of shock flashed past his eyes, and his gaze towards the 5th Elder also underwent a great change. Although Jianchen did not become completely taken within it just before, he was shocked speechless by the 5th Elder's ability. With just a gaze, he had been imperceptibly affected. This caused a great storm to brew over Jianchen's calmness. It must be known that not only was he a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, he was also an extremely powerful saint ruler, who had comprehended the mysteries of the world with a naturally powerful presence. If it was another Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, or another Saint Ruler, they definitely would not have been able to break out from the trance as easily. Seeing how quickly Jian Chun had recovered, an undetectable sliver of surprise flashed across the fifth elder's eyes. His opinion of Jian Chun increased once again. Yang Yutian, you really are an unprecedented prodigy of the Tianyuan continent. You indeed possess power that exceeds Radiant Saint Masters at the same level as you. Thank you for praising me. Jian Chun remained calm, without any ripples of emotions in his tone. Not bad, not arrogant or rash. You're quite a bit stronger than the other Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters. The fifth elder nodded his head slightly, very satisfied with Jian Chun's performance in his heart. He continued, Yang Yutian, you must know the purpose of you coming here today. After today, you'll become a core member of the Union, and will be able to enter the Radiant Saint Tower to practice radiant arts, which have been passed down from the ancient times. Only our Radiant Saint Master Union possesses these radiant arts. They're definitely not something that regular Radiant Saint Masters can obtain. Hearing that, Jian Chun's heart was immediately filled with anticipation. He had wanted to see the wondrous radiant arts since long ago. At this moment, the fifth elder slowly raised his hand. The surrounding radiant saint force quickly gathered in his palm, forming a huge, silvery sword 3 meters in length in the blink of an eye. He said, Yang Yutian, do you see? This is a radiant arte. It's condensed from the surrounding radiant satin force using a special method, forming something with great power for attack. Jian Chun immediately looked at the huge sword. Although the sword was condensed from the gentle radiant saint force, he could feel the ripples of an extremely forceful energy, filled with violence. Just when Jian Chun looked at the sword, a weird expression flashed across the fifth elder's eyes. An undetectable ripple of thought shot out from the center of his eyebrows, landing in between Jian Chun's eyebrows with lightning speed. Chapter 736, Comprehending the Arts 1. An invisible strand of thought entered the center of Jian Chun's eyebrows. It caused Jian Chun to become stagnant, and the light in his eyes quickly disappeared. It became dull, as if he was an empty, spiritless shell. The fifth elder glared at Jian Chun. Only after discovering Jian Chun's dull and lifeless eyes did he relax immediately. He could not help but sneer coldly as he mumbled to himself, Yang Yutian, no matter how prodigious of a genius you are, you're still helpless before my soul confusion. The fifth elder understood that the technique would not last very long on Class 6, Radiant Saint Master, so his face immediately became stern. With a thought, a thick layer of Radiant Saint force quickly gathered before him, slowly forming a weird seal, floating mid-air. The fifth elder's gaze immediately became sharp. An invisible thought of his drifted from the center of his eyebrows, closely joining with the weird seal before him, as if it was drawing something. The whole process lasted for quite a while, before the fifth elder finally retracted his energy. He looked up at Jian Chun and said, Yang Yutian, this is the symbol of the core members of the Union. I'll fuse it into your mind, don't resist. As soon as he finished, the fifth elder extended his finger and pointed at the weird seal floating before him. It immediately turned into a white streak, disappearing into the center of Jian Chun's eyebrows. Afterwards, there was deathly silence. Only after the seal successfully entered Jian Chun's head did the elder relax greatly. He could not help but have the corners of his lips curl into a slight but weird smile. He thought, Yang Yutian, you won't be able to escape from the Union's control no matter what with this now, unless you reach Class 8. But that's impossible. The fifth elder knew very well about the effects of the seal. Once the seal entered the target's mind, it would hide deeply. Even Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters were unable to detect the existence of the seal. Although the seal controlled the target's life, its greatest ability was that it would unconsciously influence the target's thoughts, making them become loyal to the Union. The Union would take up all of the target's thoughts. Once a lot of time had passed, the seal will have completely fused with the target's spirit, and the person would also become completely subservient to the Union. The person who cast it would even be able to directly control the person. The fifth elder gradually calmed down and sent out another sliver of thought, entering Jian Chun's head by the center of his eyebrows. Shortly afterwards, Jian Chen's body jerked slightly, and his dull eyes recovered some life. His gaze was calm, completely the same as before, as if nothing had happened at all. Yang Yutian, this is your communication jade. This communication jade can only be used by Radiant Saint Masters. Not only is it something that symbolizes your status as a core member of the Union, you're also able to communicate with other core members in a given area through this. An ancient jade pendant had already appeared in the elder's hands at some certain time. He passed it over to Jian Chen with a smile, which was filled with benevolence. Jian Chen accepted the jade pendant from the fifth elder as he would normally. He saw that the jade pendant was around half the size of a hand, and carried marks left behind by the past. On both sides of the pendant, there were intricate carvings. Yang Yutian, you must remember that the communication jade can only be used by you and mustn't be given to anyone else. It's extremely valuable, and originates from the ancient times. There aren't many left now. Other than the core members of the Union, only a few important members of the Union possess the right to carry it. The fifth elder's calm voice carried some severity. Yang Yutian understands. After a slight clasping of his hands, he put the communication jade into his space ring. The fifth elder nodded happily. Yang Yutian, you're now a core member of the Union. This communication jade will now be the symbol of your status, and with it, you can now enter the Radiant Saint Tower to practice radiant arts. By the way, the method of using it is recorded within the pendant. All you need is to send your thoughts into it and you'll know. Alright, I need to go rest for a while, you should go. The Radiant Saint Tower is at the very top of the castle. You shouldn't have any problems getting there with the pendant. Jian Chen left the fifth elder's room. As soon as he left, his gaze immediately became icy cold, and a surge of powerful killing intent flashed across his eyes. However, he recovered back to normal in an instant, as if nothing had happened. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, is there anywhere I can help you with? A soft voice sounded from behind Jian Chen. It was the girl who had brought Jian Chen to the room, currently looking at him with a courteous gaze. I'm unfamiliar with this area. Take me to the Radiant Saint Tower. Jian Chen said indifferently. Yes, Master Yang Yutian. However, I do not possess the right to enter the Radiant Saint Tower. I can only take you to the main entrance. The servant girl said. No problem, lead the way. After Jian Chen had left, a figure in a light screen appeared in the fifth elder's room. If Jian Chen was there, he would recognize that the person was the master he had accepted, the president of the Radiant Saint Union. Fifth elder, was everything successful? The president of the union stared at the fifth elder. His profound gaze seemed to be able to see through the elder's spirit. The elder was also a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master, yet he carried an expression of great respect. President, this Yang Yutian really does have some abilities. He actually broke free from my bewitching eye, making me use soul confusion. Though it was still very successful, just that using soul confusion made me consume quite some energy. Listening to the fifth elder's report, the president was extremely satisfied. He said, this Yang Yutian's talent is extremely great, especially in the area of radiant arts. It's already approaching Class 7. If he reaches Class 7, perhaps his level for radiant arts will reach my level. So we all should treat him with care. The president is extremely correct. We definitely cannot let such a prodigy go. The fifth elder said. Also, I have a weird feeling. This Yang Yutian might become the first Class 8, Radiant Saint Master, since the ancient times in the future. The president muttered to himself with a stern expression. What? The fifth elder was greatly surprised and stared at the president in disbelief. The president did not understand why the fifth elder was so surprised. He continued. Fifth elder, the news about Yang Yutian must have already spread to the 3 great clans of the empire. Right now, the Holy Empire is not very peaceful, so Yang Yutian's safety is extremely crucial. You will handle this. Yes, President. After handing over the tasks, the president's image completely disappeared along with the light screen, as if he had never appeared before. Jian Chen followed behind the servant expressionlessly, up through the castle. The gleam in his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. The Radiant Saint Tower was at the very top of the castle. It was a structure that symbolized the union. The very tip of the tower was where the only saint artifact that allowed Radiant Saint Masters to reach Class 7 was kept, hidden within a 10-meter-wide ball of pure Radiant Saint force, which Jianchen saw when he first arrived at the Union. The servant arrived at the main entrance of the Radiant Saint Tower with Jianchen and stopped. "Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, this is the furthest I can take you." Jianchen nodded slightly. He scanned past the big, tightly shut door in front of him before striding in. "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, please provide an object of authentication." As soon as Jianchen approached the door, he was stopped by a guard outside the door. The guard was a middle-aged man, a Heaven Saint Master. Jianchen said nothing, directly pulling out the communication jade from his space ring that was from the fifth elder. The guard took up the jade pendant from Jianchen's hand and examined it. He returned it to Jianchen after confirming its authenticity, before making a gesture towards the door. "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, please." With that, the door towards the tower began to open. Jianchen passed through the door and walked up narrow, coiling stairs up the tower. He was currently at the top of the castle. After climbing up a height of 20 meters, Jianchen finally arrived before a small door. Shortly afterwards, he focused his attention and discovered an old green-robed old man, sitting on the ground. He was guarding the small door. "Saint Ruler." Jianchen was secretly surprised. He had never thought that there would be a saint ruler guarding the place. "Do you possess the object of authentication?" The old man remained close-eyed and said calmly. Jianchen immediately pulled out the communication jade. "You may enter. Remember, do not bring anything out from inside. Do not play any tricks. This is a barrier cast down by Saint Kings, and all objects within have a special mark. Once they are brought out, you will be killed mercilessly by the barrier." The old man remained close-eyed, yet his tone was stern and cold. "Thank you, Senior, for your warning." Jianchen clasped his hands at the old man. Before striding in, he pushed open the small wooden door and entered. What he saw inside was a large hall. The decor of the hall was extremely simple. Other than the single bookshelf in the center of the room, there were a few tables and chairs placed neatly around the room. Jianchen gazed around, before focusing on the shelf of books in the center, slowly walking over. There were not many books on the shelf. It did not even exceeded 100, all with varying thicknesses. Each book was made from high-class magical beast skin. The skins were already yellowed, carrying marks left behind by the past. They had already existed for an unknown amount of time. Perhaps these are the secret manuals in which the radiant arts are recorded in? Looking around at the books, Jianchen mumbled to himself. Afterwards, he randomly pulled out a book, bearing the 3 large words Radiant Saint Shield on the cover in elegant handwriting. Filled with curiosity, Jianchen began to read slowly. Gradually, he gained some understanding of the Radiant Arte. The Radiant Saint Shield was a defensive-type Radiant Arte, and seemed to be made just for Radiant Saint Masters. Other than Radiant Saint Masters, no one else could practice it, not even fighters. The technique was essentially coalescing the surrounding Radiant Saint force into a shield to block the opponent's attack, and its strength would vary according to the caster's strength. It sounded easy, but actually using Radiant Saint force to create a shield capable of blocking powerful attacks was not that easy. In other words, without any exaggeration whatsoever, even a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master, would never be able to coalesce a shield from Radiant Saint force capable of blocking powerful attacks without grasping the basics. This was because Radiant Saint force was different from the Saint force of other attributes. Radiant Saint force was innately filled with a gentle characteristic, possessing the wondrous and powerful ability of rejuvenation. As a result, it created fragile Radiant Saint Masters, which made Radiant Saint Masters to become known publicly as a harmless group, unable to attack, on the Tianyuan continent. However, the secret technique for Radiant Arts was a unique way of converting the gentle Radiant Saint force, transforming it into extreme Yang Qi, allowing it to be able to harm people. However, the process of conversion was extremely complicated. Jianchen believed that if there were no relevant resources, even Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters would not be able to come up with such a method. Chapter 737. Comprehending the Arts. 2. Jianchen carefully read the information in the book. Afterwards, he closed his eyes and pondered for a while. He silently simulated the coalescence of the radiant saint shield in his mind, before snapping open his eyes. His gaze immediately became determined. Radiant. Saint. Shield. Jianchen said word by word. He slowly raised his right hand, and thick radiant saint force quickly gathered in his hand. In just a single second, it gathered to form a meter-wide shield. The entire shield was ethereal, as if it was a cloud of mist. The hand Jianchen had extended towards it actually passed through it without any obstructions. Jianchen revealed an expression of disappointment. The radiant saint shield was the ultimate shield to block attacks in terms of defense. Although the shield he had formed possessed a shape, it had no other use. It was completely and utterly useless, unable to even block a breeze, much less powerful attacks. Looks like grasping radiant arts is not easy. To convert the gentle radiant saint force to extreme yang qi is just too difficult. The true radiant saint shield recorded in the book is something tangible, and is much stronger than essence iron. Yet the radiant saint shield I formed is only ethereal, nothing like the actual thing. Jianchen murmured to himself. The gentleness and regenerative abilities of radiant saint force innately restricted its potential for growth. As a result, radiant saint masters were publicly renowned as harmless people. Their weakness and inability to cultivate saint force made them the same as ordinary folk. He had failed the first time, but Jianchen did not become dejected at all. He read the description of converting radiant saint force in the book carefully again. He understood that in order to practice radiant arts, the conversion of radiant saint force was an extremely crucial step. Jianchen completely forgot about time in the radiant saint tower. He devoted all his attention into the practice, while the small tiger that accompanied him did not interrupt Jianchen either. It lay quietly on Jianchen's shoulder, constantly moving its little head, observing the surroundings curiously. Half a day later, Jianchen slowly put away the book in his hand. He raised his right hand again, and the surrounding radiant saint force quickly coalesced, creating a meter-wide round shield once again. Jianchen stared at the shield in his hand in interest, but then his gaze became gloomy. He sighed gently. This still isn't enough. The shield's still too ethereal. Looks like I still haven't completely grasped the method of conversion. Jianchen allowed the shield to disperse, but he did not continue looking at the book. He pondered for a while with his head down. In that half a day, he had already memorized all the information in the book. He could probably even recite it backwards, so there was no point in any more reading. Right now, he needed to master the conversion of radiant saint force, because only then could he continue on to radiant arts. Youngster, you must be new. Suddenly, an old voice echoed from behind, breaking Jianchen's train of thought. Jianchen turned towards the origin of the voice. He only saw an old man in hemp clothes with a clean cloth, wiping at the tables, chairs and walls not too far away. He actually made no sound at all. Jianchen immediately focused his gaze, staring deeply at the old man behind him. A sliver of shock flashed across his eyes. Before he was in thought, but he remained vigilant of the unfamiliar surroundings. However, he did not sense when the old man had appeared at all. If the old man did not speak himself, perhaps Jianchen would still fail to notice that there was an additional person. Youngster, you're quite impressive. I've stayed here for so many years, and I've seen plenty of Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters. Though basically all of them were over 100 years in age. You're the only one who's reached Class 6 in your 20s. The old man spoke extremely slowly. His old voice actually carried a powerless feeling, making him seem deficient in a vital energy of life. Jianchen stood up from the ground and clasped his hands at the old man. Young Yutiangreet Sr. Jianchen was unable to see through the old man at all. In Jianchen's eyes, he seemed to be an extremely normal old man, without any irregularities. However, Jianchen was not so naive to believe so, and instead felt that the old man was even more profound. This old man is at least a 7th heavenly layer saint ruler, or even beyond that. Jianchen estimated to himself. This was because if 7th heavenly layer saint rulers wanted to conceal themselves, they could do something similar to the old man. Yang Yutian, practicing radiant arts is not hard, but what's hard is converting radiant saint force. Before basically all the new Class 6, radiant saint masters would spend several years, or even decades in fully grasping the method to convert radiant saint force. It cannot be achieved so quickly. You should take the book and go to a room for seclusion upstairs, just in case you break things in here. The old man said weakly, like someone at death's door. Since the very start, he focused on doing his own things, without even glancing at Jianchen. Jianchen clasped his hands at the old man, and then returned the book back to where he took it from on the bookshelf. Afterwards, he went upstairs, planning on going into the rooms for seclusion, mentioned by the old man, to continue his comprehension. There were quite a few rooms upstairs, each with their own small wooden door. Behind the door was a small room encased in a barrier. Not only did the barrier possess great defense, it could block out all sounds as well, allowing people to practice inside without any interruptions. Jianchen looked around and discovered that many of the rooms had a piece of communication jade hung on their doors. It meant that the rooms were already taken. Jianchen found an empty room and hung his piece of communication jade onto the door, before entering it to continue his comprehension of converting radiant saint force. In the blink of an eye, Jianchen had already stayed in the tower for half a month. In that time, Jianchen did not leave the room at all, focusing all his energy practicing radiant arts. Jianchen also constantly fed the white tiger heavenly resources, allowing it to strengthen by quite a lot. Inside the room for seclusion, Jianchen sat on the icy floor peacefully. His hands were on his knees and in front of him. A shield glowing with soft light hung in the air. The shield was completely solid and seemed like a big white rock. Jianchen made a small gesture with his hand, and the shield immediately hovered slowly towards Jianchen. Jianchen gently smacked the shield, and a shield immediately gave out a deep sound. Jianchen could not help but have his lips curl into a slight smile. After half a month of hard study, he had finally grasped the method of converting radiant saint force. At this very moment, he could already coalesce solid objects from radiant saint force. That radiant saint shield from just then should be able to block attacks from great saint masters, but it'll definitely break from earth saint masters. Though I can easily make the defense of this shield increase several times with my current ability, it should be able to block attacks from heaven saint masters. Jianchen mumbled to himself. Although heaven saint masters, even when using heaven tier battle skills, struggled to injure his chaotic body, Jianchen could not reveal his strength as a fighter in the city of God. If his identity was divulged, he would probably lose all the hard progress he had made, as well as face troubles from the Union, because he already knew some secrets he should not know. I've already gotten a grasp of this radiant saint shield. I wonder if there's any more powerful defensive techniques. Jianchen left the room which he had stayed for half a month, arriving before the bookshelf with the radiant arts from before. He flipped through the books, one by one. The old man discovered by Jianchen half a month ago was nowhere to be seen. Although there were several books on the shelf, most of them did not pique Jianchen's interest, and only a few of them were methods of practicing radiant arts. Radiant Saint Sword. Jianchen picked up a thick book. After flipping through it, he learnt that it was an offensive radiant arte, able to coalesce radiant saint force into a powerful giant sword, which could be controlled by thought to attack. Jianchen remembered the position of the book, before returning it to the shelf, and continuing through the other books. Radiance Burst. Shape converted radiant saint force into raindrops, and used the power of thought to control and attack. Area of effect. Radiant Saint Armor. Transform radiant saint force into a tough but flexible substance, and coalescing a layer of it on the body, to protect caster. Radiant Saint. Coalesce radiant saint force to create a clone exactly the same as caster in the radius thought can extend to. Does not fear any attack. Soaring technique. Coalesce radiant saint force under feet and soar in the air. Jianchen read through the books on the shelf, one by one. As he read the details of each recorded technique, he felt more and more astonished. At this moment, Jianchen had already completely abandoned the notion that radiant saint masters were harmless and possessed no method of attack. Radiant Saint Master could become just as strong as fighters, just that this strength would only appear in the later stages, as all the radiant arts he had seen required at least Class 5 to practice. Also, it would be several times more difficult compared to fighters. Chapter 738, Supreme Radiant Arte, God's Descent. This time, Jianchen did not immediately go into seclusion to comprehend the techniques like last time. Instead, he memorized the contents of every single book until he could recite them backwards. This trip to the Radiant Saint Tower was quite a big harvest for Jianchen. He obtained the wondrous radiant arts, which allowed his abilities as a Radiant Saint Master to greatly increase. Not only did it include powerful regenerative abilities, even his attack increased greatly. Although he possessed the chaotic body, which made these so-called radiant arts seem useless, they could be useful to him under some particular circumstances. Jianchen spent an entire day memorizing all the radiant arts that he had read through. Shortly afterwards, he suddenly gazed towards the very top of the bookshelf. At the top, there were 3 thick books, but each of them were covered in a layer of radiant saint force which formed a seal, preventing others from reading it. Jianchen knew that the 3 thick books were definitely the most valuable objects on the bookshelf. He extended his hands to grab it, but discovered that the layer of radiant saint force around the books actually prevented his hand from approaching it in astonishment. He was unable to touch the books at all. Jianchen focused his attention and pondered for a while. A ball of dense radiant saint force suddenly appeared in his hand, reaching towards the 3 books once again. However, it was exactly the same as last time. His hand was blocked once again, unable to approach the books sealed within. "Sir, those 3 books cannot be read by us Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters, because the radiant arts inscribed within can only be practiced by Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters. Moreover, those 3 books are extremely different from other books. They cannot be opened at all. The only way to read the contents is by extending your thought into it." Suddenly, a voice echoed from rather close by. A middle-aged man, also in white robes and with a blue badge, walked down from the floor of seclusion above. "Thank you, sir." Jianchen examined the middle-aged man, before clasping his fist at him. He then followed what the middle-aged man had said, approaching the 3 books with his presence. When Jianchen's presence approached the Radiant Saint Force seal, he encountered an extremely powerful resistance, preventing Jianchen's presence from entering it. At the same time, the 3 books suddenly began to glow with a dazzling white light. This was the behavior of the seal being activated. Seeing that, the middle-aged man shook his head with a forced smile. "Sir, you should stop wasting your energy." Apparently, the seal for those radiant arts were cast down by a past president of the Union himself. Unless you are Class 7, it's absolutely impossible for you to break through the seal and access the restricted information. There's been plenty of Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters who've attempted again and again, but the outcome was all the same. No one can break through the seal. Jianchen turned a deaf ear to the middle-aged man's words. He extended his presence with all his might, shaping it into a needle to attempt to break through the first book's seal with great effort. The Radiant Saint Force seal on the first book trembled violently. It continued as such for several seconds, before the seal was finally broken through by Jianchen. As a result, Jianchen's presence also successfully entered the book. Immediately, a great pile of information surged violent into Jianchen's mind, making him feel a slight throbbing pain. "What? You've actually broken through the seal?" The middle-aged man stared closely at Jianchen. Wide-eyed, his face was filled with disbelief. For countless years, the seal of the 3 books could not be broken unless it was a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master. Right now, he had just witnessed a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master break through it, so he was filled with disbelief. However, a gleam of light soon flashed past through the man's eyes. He thought, this is an extraordinary chance to see the radiant arte that can only be practiced by Class 7 people. The man did not hesitate at all, immediately sending forth a thought of his from the center of his eyebrows. It shot towards the book with the seal Jianchen had broken through, like a lightning bolt. However, just when the man's thought approached the book, the seal immediately recovered. glowing with a dazzling white light to block the man's thought. The man did not give up. He continued to rush at the seal with all his might, but he still failed to break through the seal, like Jianchen in the end. He could only sigh helplessly and abandon the idea of seeing a Class 7 Radiant Arte. Brother, what Radiant Arte was recorded in the book? The middle-aged man looked towards Jianchen. His gaze was fanatical and filled with admiration. Jianchen did not speak, as he currently was eyes closed, digesting the large amount of information that had suddenly surged into his mind. A while later, Jianchen slowly opened his eyes, and a gleam of light flashed across his eyes. The information that surged into his mind indeed carried information for a Radiant Arte, where only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters could practice. The Radiant Arte's name was Judgment Sword, an extremely powerful Radiant Arte for attack. According to the records, a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master using the Radiant Arte could slaughter ordinary saint rulers. However, when Jianchen learned about the Radiant Arte, it was clearly useless, as he already possessed the strength to kill 5th Heavenly Layer saint rulers. Jianchen then gazed towards the 2 remaining books. Without any hesitation, he sent forth his presence again, working on breaking through the seals of the 2 books. The middle-aged man gulped with difficulty. He stared fixedly at Jianchen, who was tinkering away at the seals. He had decided that once the seal was broken, he would send forth his own thought to learn the details of the books. Radiant arts that could only be practiced by Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters would move any Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, as once they received the Radiant Arte, their strength would greatly increase. Even if they would not be able to display the power of the entire Arte, it was much stronger than other Radiant arts. An example would be a Heaven-tier battle skill in an Earth Saint Master's hand. Although the Earth Saint Master would struggle to display the skill's entire might, it was much stronger than Earth-tier battle skill. If an Earth Saint Master used a Heaven-tier battle skill, they could easily injure a Heaven Saint Master heavily, or even kill them. After a few seconds, the second book seal was also broken through by Jianchen. The details of the book immediately flooded into Jianchen's head. At the same time, the man who had spent quite some time waiting beside him immediately sent forth his thought to explore the book. However, the outcome was exactly the same as before. Just when his thought approached the book, the seal immediately recovered, blocking his thought outside. "Ai!" The middle-aged man gave out a long sigh. He was filled with regret, and his gaze at Jianchen also carried some envy. "God's protection," Jianchen mumbled softly. The Radiant Arte recorded within the second book was an extremely powerful defensive Arte. It would gather the surrounding Radiant Saint force and fuse it with the body, allowing the body to possess defense akin to steel, and also carried no side effects. The Radiant Arte was essentially made to fit for Radiant Saint Masters, making up for their fragile bodies. However, the only disadvantage was that the Arte could not be sustained for long periods of time, and that only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters could cast it, varying in defense according to the caster's strength. Can this God's protection be used along with the chaotic body? Thinking up to there, a few ripples appeared in Jianchen's calm mind. Afterwards, the seal of the third book was also broken through by Jianchen. An extremely large amount of information flooded into Jianchen's mind again, which caused him to close his eyes without any choice, as he worked hard in digesting the information. This time, the information was much more plentiful than the previous 2. Jianchen remained there for half an hour before digesting it all. In the moment he opened his eyes, joy flooded his face. He was extremely excited. The third book actually recorded a supreme Radiant Arte, God's Descent. God's Descent was the first heaven-defying Radiant Arte from the ancient times, a forbidden technique that could only be used by Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. This was because the Arte was extremely powerful. If a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master cast it, they could easily slaughter saint rulers, with 9th Heavenly Layer saint rulers being no exception. It could even compete with saint kings. From the information recorded in the book, Jianchen learnt that in the ancient times, a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master used it, and actually slaughtered 2 saint emperors. However, the price for using the Arte was extremely great. Every time it was cast, It would consume at least a century's worth of life. The ancient Class 8, Radiant Saint Master had only killed the 2 Saint Emperors by paying a price of a millennium of his life. Not only was the God's Descent the most powerful arte Radiant Saint Masters could learn, it was also the supreme Radiant arte classified as forbidden by all Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. Unless they were absolutely forced to, no one was willing to use it, because the price was just too great. Even though it was like that, it did not affect Jian Chen's joy for the skill. This was because he knew that once he mastered the arte at Class 7, he possessed the strength to threaten 9th heavenly layer saint rulers. Even if it were a saint king, he was able to stall some time, even though he still would not be able to come out victorious. Jian Chen's heartbeat began to fasted. At this moment, he began to anticipate for a day where he could reach Class 7 sooner. Looking at Jian Chen's amazement, the middle-aged man beside Jian Chen definitely realized it was some outstanding radiant arte. After a slight hesitation, he finally gave in to the powerful curiosity of his. With a smile, he asked kindly, "Brother, looking at your amazement, you've probably discovered some outstanding radiant arte. I wonder if you can divulge some of it to me. Then we can investigate the mysteries of this arte together, and see whether we can find a method to use the arte with our current strength." Jian Chen completely understood the man's intentions. "Sir, if you want to comprehend the 3 radiant arts, you should go at it yourself. After all, the union has rules. Without their permission, it is forbidden to teach the arts to anyone else. I cannot risk breaking this rule." Throwing down that, Jian Chen turned around and left. He directly went to the 2nd floor to go into seclusion. In the coming period of time, he had decided to completely comprehend the radiant arts he had grasped, especially the arte God's Descent, which had received much of Jian Chen's attention. Chapter 739. Extravagant invitations from everywhere within the Radiant Saint Tower. Jian Chen had already returned to the room he had originally taken up, and devoted all his attention to the comprehension of radiant arts. After going into seclusion, the man who watched as Jian Chen obtained the 3 great arts stood obstinately outside Jian Chen's room, perhaps due to the fact that he was unwilling to let go of his brush with the 3 arts. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Today, the wooden door to the room that had been tightly shut for 3 months finally opened slowly. The white-robed Jian Chen walked out, and on his shoulder, a small snow-white tiger lay at ease. After 3 months of comprehension, Jian Chen had basically completely grasped the radiant arts. Only the 3 Class 7 arts remained at a beginner stage. Jian Chen had spent the most time for the 3 arts. However, no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to cast it completely. Under his full strength, he was able to cast it, but the strength was not as great as it was mentioned in the book, only as strong as a strike from a Heaven Saint Master at most. Although Jian Chen's talent in practicing radiant arts approached Class 7, he was still a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master in the end. Reaching such a step was already quite outstanding. If it was any other Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, they definitely would not be able to do what Jian Chen did. Jian Chen pushed open the small wooden door. With a single glance, he noticed the middle-aged man at the entrance to the room. The sounds from the wooden door disturbed the resting middle-aged man. He immediately snapped open his eyes, and when he discovered Jian Chen had left the room for seclusion, joy appeared in his eyes. He hurriedly stood up and smiled brightly, greeting Jian Chen in an attempt to fawn on him. "Brother, you've finally come out. How did the comprehension of the 3 arts go? You must have benefited from it greatly." Jian Chen furrowed his eyebrows and said indifferently, "Sir, perhaps you're looking for me for something by waiting here?" "It's nothing at all. Brother, this humble one is Quan Yu Kai. I've been deeply moved by the talent and powerful abilities displayed by Brother, and I feel constant ripples of admiration towards Brother. So, I've been looking for the opportunity to have a talk with Brother. If Brother is not busy, Brother can give some directions to Quan Yu Kai. Quan Yu Kai will be forever grateful," the man said with a smile. Jian Chen furrowed his eyebrows once again. The man's behavior had made Jian Chen doubt whether he was a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master at all. Actually, without any pride, a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master possessed. "Sir, apologies. I have matters to attend to, so I don't have the time to talk with you. Farewell. Jianchen cupped his fist at Quan Yukai before leaving immediately. He did not even glance back at Quan Yukai. Oi, 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 brother, don't leave so hurriedly. For you, I've waited outside for the entire 3 months. I haven't even left there for food, shits, or piss. Even if it's not meritorious, it's still hard work. How can you treat me like this? Quan Yukai immediately chased behind Jianchen in a fashion that did not suit his status, chattering away beside Jianchen. Brother, you must be new. Otherwise, why haven't I seen you before? In order to make preparations for reaching Class 7 in a year, I've spent a total of 20 years in the Radiant Saint Tower, working hard at the comprehension of radiant arts. So I know nothing about what's happened between these 20 years. So I guess brother must be a new Class 6, Radiant Saint Master, who's broken through in the past 20 years. Am I correct? Brother, how old are you? What should I call you? And what clan are you from? Brother, radiant arts are extremely profound, the only method in which Radiant Saint Masters can attack. I've lived for over 300 years. I reached Class 5 when I was in my 50s. Because my talent was not bad, I was taught radiant arts by the Union in advance. So I've spent close to 300 years in researching radiant arts. Although I still haven't reached the apex, my achievements are quite great. If brother needs anything, I can make an exception and pass on all this experience and insights to you. Quan Yukai chattered away patiently by Jianchen, completely ignoring his cold gaze. His shamelessness made Jianchen doubt whether he was a revered Class 6, Radiant Saint Master several times. Jianchen left the Radiant Saint Tower, completely ignoring Quan Yotsai's pesterings, and went downstairs. Yang Yutian. Suddenly a voice sounded. It was the 5th elder who had held Jianchen's core member ceremony, walking over from the distance. Beside the 5th elder was a sturdy middle-aged man. A wisp of undetectable coldness flashed through Jianchen's eyes. However, his expression remained unchanged, purposely clasping his hands at the 5th elder courteously. Yang Yutian greets the 5th elder. Quan Yukai greets the 5th elder. Quan Yukai, who had followed Jianchen out of the tower, also clasped his hands at the 5th elder. Shortly afterwards, he shot a glance at Jianchen and laughed. So you're called Yang Yutian. Even if you don't tell me, I know your name. The 5th elder arrived in front of Jianchen and looked at him with a kind smile. Yang Yutian, every core member of the Union can request the Union to send a fighter to protect him. The president has paid particular great attention to you, so he's called on Mr. Yang Ling to protect you. Mr. Yang Ling is a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master, and also knows a Heaven tier battle skill. He is extremely powerful in battle. If he protects you, no one in the City of God will be able to harm you. The large man beside the 5th elder clasped his hands at Jianchen and said with a low voice, Yang Ling greets Mr. Yang Yutian. I thank the 5th elder and the president for their concern. Jianchen said. The 5th elder chuckled and said, Yang Yutian, how can you call him president? You should call him master. Jianchen could not help but smile. The 5th elder is extremely correct. All right, Yang Yutian, I won't take up any more of your time. I just happen to have some matters I need to deal with, so I shall be leaving first. Also, there's still another month until the competition between strong Radiant Saint Masters. When the time comes, you have to participate and win a position in the top 10. Only with that can you obtain an opportunity at breaking through to Class 7. The 5th elder said to Jianchen. Afterwards, he turned around and left, without even waiting for Jianchen's reply. As soon as the 5th elder left, Quan Yukai arrived beside Jianchen and asked, Oi, Yang Yutian, is it true that the president is actually your master? Quan Yotsai's gaze was filled with disbelief. Jianchen did not pay any attention to Quan Yukai. He stared calmly as the 5th elder's figure while he thought for a while, before leaving. As for Yang Ling, he remained a step behind, following closely. Just when Jianchen left the headquarters of the Union, a dozen or so people immediately surrounded him from all directions. A hint of disdain flashed across Yang Ling's eyes, who stood behind Jianchen. However, he soon recovered his composure, as he already identified the people and knew that they did not come to harm Jianchen. Are you perhaps Sir Yang Yutian? The dozen people rushed in front of Yang Yutian and asked the same question with extremely courteous attitudes. I am indeed Yang Yutian. I wonder who you all are. Jianchen said calmly. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the Zhou family, one of the 8 great clans. I have come representing my master to invite Master Yang Yutian to visit the estate. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the Hou clan, one of the 8 great clans. I have come representing my master to invite Master Yang Yutian to visit the estate. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the Sauter clan, one of the 8 great clans. I have come representing my master to invite Master Yang Yutian to visit the estate. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the dozen people all declared their identities. Other than 8 of them, who came from the 8 great clans of the City of God, the rest of them originated from second-rate clans. Their intentions were all the same, to invite Jianchen to visit their clan. This can't be. All of the renowned 8 clans of the City of God have come. Brother Yang Yutian, so you're so well received. This is unfair. I, Quan Yukai, am also a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, but why haven't I ever been so well received? Perhaps the outside world has changed in the 20 years I stayed in the Radiant Saint Tower? Quan Yukai said unhappily beside Jianchen with an resentful expression. Jianchen frowned slightly and called out. Since your master want to see me so much, why haven't they come personally? All the people began to hesitate, and the 8 people from the great clans even furrowed their brows slightly. To them, this Yang Yutian was just too arrogant. The 8 great clans could not be compared to the second or third-rate clans. It was still not enough for their masters to come personally, just for a slightly talented Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Whatever. Since your masters want to see me, I'll see them. Tell your masters that in 3 days I, Yang Yutian, will reserve the most famous floating restaurant on Fragrance River outside the city. If they don't want to come, I will not force them. Jianchen said, completely disregarding the 8 great clans. Yang Yutian, this isn't very great. Master Hou is the patriarch of the Hou clan. His status is clearly some else, incomparable to the second-rate clans. One person said unhappily. Then Master Hou can choose to not come. I am not forcing anyone. Jianchen directly replied coldly, without showing any concern for the person's dignity. Now that he knew radiant arts, he feared nobody unless saint rulers personally came. The person's face became ugly. He said with a slightly deep voice, I will report what Master Yang Yutian has said exactly as it is to Master Hou. Farewell. After the person from the Hou clan left, the people from the other 7 great clans also bid farewell to Jianchen. Witnessing Jianchen's attitude towards the Hou clan, they all gave up on their resentful thoughts. They would rather return with exactly what Jianchen had said than take a cold shoulder from Jianchen and leave in dejection, avoiding taking any more losses. Chapter 740. Fragrance River. After the people of the 8 clans left, Quan Yukai said to Jianchen with an expression of respect, Brother Yang Yutian, you really are impressive. Not even showing respect to the 8 great clans. You're the most impressive Class 6 Radiant Saint Master I've seen. I admire you, I really do. Yang Ling stood indifferently behind Jianchen, carrying out his duty of protecting Jianchen attentively. As for Jianchen not showing respect towards the 8 clans, he felt that it was entirely logical, as if it should have turned out that way. Ignoring Jianchen's talent, his status as the disciple of the Union's president already allowed him to stand on equal ground with Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. The 8 clans really did not have the right to be arrogant before him. Jianchen ignored Yuan Yukai and found a luxurious carriage on the street. After discussing the price with the driver, he climbed aboard. Yang Ling followed closely behind Jianchen and sat quietly with his eyes closed beside Jianchen. He did not say anything. Brother Yang Yutian, wait for me. Quan Yukai also crawled into the carriage shamelessly, sitting with Jianchen while he giggled. Jianchen furrowed his brows slightly and stared at Quan Yukai unhappily. Why are you following me? Quan Yukai did not even become red-faced. He only chuckled. Brother Yang Yutian, when we're together, we can talk at any time. This is an extremely rare opportunity for both of us. Also, in the Radiant Saint Master competition in a month's time, we'll definitely both make it into the top 10 if we're together, and we'll easily obtain a chance for reaching Class 7. Quan Yu Kai, I know your intentions are for the 3 Radiant Arts. Though you should give up on that notion. You should know the rules of the Union. Those 3 arts can only be obtained by yourself. I won't tell you about them. Jianchen slowly closed his eyes and no longer said any more. He knew that the reason why Quan Yu Kai followed him was most probably for the 3 Radiant Arts that could only be practiced by Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. Quan Yu Kai chuckled. Brother Yang Yutian, you see, the competition is getting closer and closer. Also, the rule of the Union is only that Radiant Arts cannot be given to outsiders. There's nothing preventing core members from exchanging it with each other. The competition is getting closer by the day. If we both get a hold of the 3 arts, we'll have a greater chance at entering the top 10. So don't you see? Quan Yu Kai rubbed his hands, staring at Jianchen enthusiastically. Jianchen sat close-eyed in the bumpy carriage, resting, as if he did not hear what Quan Yu Kai had said at all. The people of the 8 clans returned to their clans very soon, passing on what Jianchen had said to their owners, without changing a single word of it. At this moment, the white-robed master Ho slowly stood up from his seat in the Ho estate. The sliver of a cold smile appeared on his face. Yang Yutian actually wants us, people of the 8 great clans, to meet on the floating restaurant of Fragrance River. How pretentious. Whatever, I'll go to it in 3 days. Let's see if this Yang Yutian's abilities are as exaggerated as the rumors. In the Chung family, one of the 8 great clans, a refined middle-aged man sat on a bed in a luxurious room. He said with a smile, "This Yang Yutian is rather interesting. Originally, it was me who invited him to the most renowned floating restaurant on Fragrance River. And now he's actually invited me. I just wonder what type of person he is. I hope he does not disappoint me." In other luxurious building, a ruddy old man sat cross-legged on a round cushion. He too said with a smile, "This Yang Yutian's actually invited the people from the 8 clans to Fragrance River. It's a little arrogant, though he indeed has the right. Whatever, I'll go in 3 days. Let's see what the 3rd disciple of the president is like." In a beautiful scenic garden, a white-robed, middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance was currently walking through a sea of flowers. He said with a soft voice, "A meeting in 3 days, on the floating restaurant of Fragrance River. Yang Yutian, you indeed have this right to invite the people from the 8 great clans, though I wonder what level in Radiant Arts you've reached, with 3 months of comprehension, and your talent approaching Class 7. At the same time, different voices sounded in the remaining great clans. The carriage bolted down the wide street, and stopped outside a branch office of the Union in the end. Jianchen exited the carriage, directly entering the building. Not only did each branch of the Radiant Saint Master Union provide tests for those below Class 4, it provided a safe residency for every single Radiant Saint Master. This was also where Lin Bai temporarily stayed. Jianchen strided into the branch in his luxurious white robes and his blue badge. The large Yang Ling followed closely behind Jianchen, constantly looking about with a stern gaze, ensuring Jianchen's safety. As for Quan Yu Kai, he did not fall behind at all, following up shamelessly and walking beside Jianchen. The appearance of 2 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters bearing blue badges in a branch office immediately caused a commotion. All the Radiant Saint Masters and fighters Jianchen passed by looked at the 2 of them with admiration and respect, but no one dared to go up and talk to them. An old man with a green badge quickly ran over from the distance. He first bowed courteously towards Jianchen and Quan Yu Kai, before opening his mouth to speak. "Esteemed Radiant Saint Masters, this lowly one is the vice manager of this branch. I wonder if I may be of help to the 2 sirs." The vice manager does not need to be so polite. "Is Lin Bai here?" Jianchen said amiably with a smile. He's here. In the past few years, Lin Bai has always stayed here. Please proceed to the guest room up ahead and wait for a moment. I'll go call Lin Bai right now," the vice manager said, making a gesture for the 2 to sit down. "No need, we'll wait here." Jianchen crossed his arms and stood there. Very soon, Lin Bai in white clothes quickly walked out from inside the branch. Beside Lin Bai were his 2 personal bodyguards. Haha, brother Yang Yutian, I just know you would come and find me. Other than my master, you're the only other class 6 radiant saint master Lin Bai know. From quite far away, Lin Bai laughed aloud. From the bottom of his heart, Jianchen revealed a smile. He had favorable opinions towards Lin Bai. Not to mention that fact that Lin Bai was an honest and reliable person. Just because he had helped Jianchen resolve the small problem with the Lei family was enough for Jianchen to feel grateful. Uncle Lin Bai, I haven't seen you in 3 months. I hope you've been well, said Jianchen with a smile. Aya, brother Yang Yutian, it's better if you just call me Lin Bai and drop the uncle. Lin Bai said with a forced smile, before looking at Quan Yukai who was beside Jianchen soon after. He quickly glanced past the blue badge of Quan Yotsai's chest, and a sliver of respect immediately appeared on his face. He asked, Brother Yang Yutian, I wonder who this esteemed Class 6 Radiant Saint Master is? Quan Yukai glanced past the badge on Lin Bai's chest, and a sliver of arrogance immediately appeared on his face. He said, I'm Quan Yukai, a friend of Brother Yang Yutian. So you're called Lin Bai? Alright, if you stick with us, we'll guarantee that you'll successfully reach Class 6. And if you encounter any problems with Radiant Arts in the future, feel free to come and find me. Quan Yukai boasted without any shame, as if he had an extremely great accomplishment in Radiant Arts. Lin Bai chuckled and clasped his hands at Quan Yukai. When the time comes, perhaps I really will need to trouble Master Quan Yukai for some directions. Quan Yukai crossed his arms and raised his head slightly, and looked at the ceiling of the building. He carried an air of self-importance and said, Small matter. If you encounter any difficulties, feel free to come look for me. For Yang Yutian's sake, I'll make an exception and help you for free. There is nothing that I, Quan Yukai, cannot handle regarding Radiant Arts. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to remember something. His air of self-importance instantly disappeared and glanced carefully at Jianchen. He added, Of course, other than the 3 Radiant Arts that only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters can practice. Uncle Lin Bai, don't listen to him talk nonsense. He's just blathering trying to trick people. You mustn't believe him. Jianchen could not put up with it any longer, and left the branch office with Lin Bai. Oi 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 Yang Yutian, how can you look down at me? I Quan Yukai am extremely famous. I'm not as deplorable as you've described. Quan Yukai was filled with recalcitrance, speaking unhappily next to Jianchen. The vice manager stared dumbfoundedly as the figures of the 3 people departed, until they had disappeared from his sights. Only then did he return to his senses. He mumbled to himself, Quan Yukai, that person's actually Quan Yukai. I heard that 100 years ago, Quan Yukai once battled the person who placed 7th in the 10 Great Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, and the outcome was a draw. Perhaps he's that Quan Yukai. Afterwards, Jianchen continued to go strolling through the various large stores of the City of God under Lin Bai's lead, in hopes of finding materials for the azulite swords. However, the outcome caused Jianchen great disappointment in the end. After 3 consecutive days of rushing about, he did not find anything. 3 days later, Jianchen bid farewell to Lin Bai. With Yang Ling and Quan Yukai, he arrived at a transportation stop in the city. After spending 2 Class 4 monster cores, he left the city through the space gate. The City of God was one of the 7 capitals of the Tianyuan continent. It took up an extremely large area, and it would take a day and night's worth of travel to go to any city gate in any direction from the center. As a result, there were a few places in the city where Saint Kings of the past had erected space gates. The space gates of the City of God were slightly different from the space gate of the Qinhuang Kingdom. It was open all year round, and had already existed for countless years. The space gates were each powered by a wondrous formation that absorbed the energy of the world, not requiring Class 5 monster cores to be activated. As a result, using the space gates in the City of God only required a fee of a single Class 4 monster core. Jianchen and the other 2 left the City of God through the space gate, before hailing a carriage to go directly to Fragrance River, 10 kilometers away. Fragrance River was an extremely beautiful scenic place, and had already existed for countless years. Apparently, when the city of God was first founded in the ancient times, the river was a chasm split open by a peerless saint emperor. The chasm was around 30 meters wide with a bottomless depth and surrounded the entire city. Afterwards, due to the accumulation of rain, it slowly filled up the chasm. In the end, the chasm essentially turned into a moat for the city of God, while the river water carried a slight fragrance. As a result, the chasm split open by a saint emperor in the ancient times slowly became a beautiful, scenic place outside the city of God, and was named Fragrance River. Chapter 741. Killing Intent on the Ferry 1. As the setting sun passed down in the sky, dusk was left behind. It was already evening. Outside the city of God, one of the capitals of the continent, it was yet another lively night by Fragrance River. On the two river banks, 30 meters apart, hung many festive lanterns of yellow and green, while many people strolled leisurely about along the river banks. There were plenty of young couples talking about love beside the river. On the surface of the river, there were various floating restaurants of different sizes, slowly traveling through the water with various colored lanterns strewn over them. Sweet melodies and elegant sounds of zither originated from the floating restaurants and echoed across the entire river. Sometimes, the loud conversations of a few aristocrats could be heard from the ferries. At the largest dock on Fragrance River, there was a huge ferry, around 300 meters in length. It was docked quietly there, like a huge beast from antiquity. On it were plenty of multicolored lanterns, dyeing the ferry an assortment of colors. It was extremely entrancing. Near the dock, there were over 100 sailors and servants in uniforms, who stood sternly in 2 rows, as if they were waiting for something. With such a huge ferry docked there, and the great formation from the people, it was rather rare. As a result, it caused the passers-by to all glance at it, and point at the giant ferry and discuss it. Isn't that the largest and most luxurious floating restaurant, the Inky Stratus? Why has it stopped there? And why is there such a grand reception? This is quite rare. Tonight, the Inky Stratus has been reserved by someone. Otherwise, why would they be wasting time and not making money by stopping here for nothing? The Inky Stratus is the most luxurious, as well as the most expensive floating restaurant. I heard that eating a meal there costs something equivalent to several months' worth of expenditures for ordinary people. Just which wealthy person reserved the entire Inky Stratus? Just when everyone was pointing and discussing the ferry, a luxurious carriage bolted over from the distance. It stopped slowly close to the dock, and shortly afterwards, 3 people got off it. Of the 3 people, 2 of them wore long, white robes with slender statures, and bore a shiny blue badge on their chests. As for the other person, he was a large-built man in tight black clothing. The 3 of them were Jian Chun, Quan Yukai, and the 6th Cycle Heaven Saint Master that the Union had sent to protect Jian Chun, Yang Ling. With the appearance of the 2 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, Jian Chun and Quan Yukai, an intense hubbub immediately appeared in the crowd that had gathered nearby. They all looked away from the ferry, towards Jian Chun and Quan Yukai. Deep respect and admiration appeared in their eyes, along with some jealousy. Jian Chun and the other 2 ignored the sounds of discussions from the surroundings, and directly walked towards the huge ferry docked right ahead. A beautifully dressed middle-aged woman immediately walked over slowly to Jian Chun's group from in front of the ferry, and courteously bowed to them. He said, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Masters, the most famous floating restaurant, the Inky Stratus, has already completed its preparations. Please board the ferry." With that, the middle-aged beauty stepped to the side and made an inviting gesture towards Jian Chun's group. Jian Chun's gaze paused on the huge ferry. He said calmly, "Other than those who are needed, let the remaining people stay here to welcome the 8 great clans of the City of God, as well as some other renowned clans." As soon as she heard the 8 great clans of the City of God, a shock immediately flashed across the middle-aged woman's eyes, and her expression became even more courteous. She said, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, this servant will definitely carry out your orders." Jian Chun's group of 3 strided into the ferry. As they passed by the 100 or so people, All of them bowed simultaneously towards Jian Chun and exclaimed, "We invite the radiant Saint Master to board the ferry." Jian Chun paused slightly in his steps, and he furrowed his eyebrows. He who always preferred to keep a low profile clearly was not too used to such a treatment. However, he recovered soon after he disappeared into the ferry. Jian Chun had already reserved the most famous and most luxurious ferry, the Inky Stratus, 2 days ago. It took up quite a lot of money, but compared to his wealth which could rival countries, it was insignificant. After Jian Chun's group disappeared into the ferry, there was another hubbub of discussion on the riverbank. However, not long after the hubbub began, the hurried sounds of gallops echoed in the distance once again. It was a luxurious carriage with over 20 large men on Class 5 magical beasts escorting it, quickly galloped over from the city. It stopped at the entrance to the dock very soon, and on the carriage, there was a banner waving in the air, and it bore the word Chung. Isn't that a carriage from the Chung family, one of the 8 great clans of the City of God? And those guards on the Class 5 magical beasts, they must be the elites of the Chong family. Since the person in the carriage requires to be escorted by the elites of the family, his status must be extremely special. Immediately, several people began to gossip and discuss, and revealed a light of deep interest in their eyes. At this moment the carriage door opened. A middle-aged man in long white robes, bearing a similar blue badge, climbed down from the carriage, before entering the ferry along with an old man. Not long after the middle-aged man entered the ferry, the hurried sounds of another carriage echoed in the distance once again. This time, it was a luxurious carriage escorted by several dozen large men in golden armors. In the end, it too stopped at the entrance to the docks, and an old man in embroidered robes climbed down from the carriage. Under the protection of 2 large middle-aged men, he strode into the ferry. That's the carriage of the Zhou family, one of the 8 great clans of the City of God. Who would have thought that they've come too? Some people recognized the identity of the group of people, and immediately cried out softly in surprise. Suddenly, a scorching wave of heat rolled in from the distance, as if the surrounding air was on fire, and caused the temperature of the river bank to rise. It's the Fire God clan, and the head of the 8 great clans. Even the people from the Fire God clan have come. There were several immediate exclamations of surprise from the crowd. There seemed to be a burning red cloud in the murky distance. Over 20 people on Class 5 magical beasts escorted a carriage. The people wore long, fire-red robes, and gave off a scorching fire-attributed presence. As they approached the lake, the thin vapor over Fragrance River slowly turned to thick mist. The Fire God clan is extremely powerful. Not only are they the head of the 8 great clans, I heard that their strength is already approaching the rulers of the City of God, the Tsar family. I heard that there is an extremely lengthy history to the Fire God clan, that they are an ancient clan that had survived from the ancient times, and they say that in the ancient times, the Fire God clan was one of the most powerful forces on the Tianyuan continent. Just that with so many years, the clan slowly declined, and fell to such a level today. The Fire God clan always keeps a low profile in the City of God. Who would have thought that they'd come to Fragrance River in such a grand scale? I really wonder what will happen tonight. Quick look, more have come. That's people from the Sar clan. I never thought that another of the 8 great clans would come. Heavens, those people are from the Madison clan. Just what is going on tonight? Half of the 8 great clans have actually come. Aren't they from the Qilong clan? The Qilong clan of the 8 great clans have also come. Quick looks, isn't that the carriage from the Ho clan? I never thought that even people from the Ho clan would come. And isn't that people of the Dekin clan? My God, people from all 8 great clans have actually gathered, and from the guards that have come, the people clearly possess quite some status in their clans. Just what day is it today? As the 8 clans gathered, it immediately caused quite a large commotion at Fragrance River. Very soon, the news of the 8 great clans gathering at Fragrance River spread like wildfire. Even the smaller ferries floating about in the river could not help themselves, but grow slightly closer. And even the zither sounds and sweet songs reverberating on the surface of the river became quieter. As the people of the 8 clans all entered the ferry, the Inky Stratus, which had been docked there for quite some time, It also began to leave slowly. It broke the surface of the water and slowly floated towards the center of the river. On the deck of the inky stratus, there were large round tables placed about, all already filled with exotic delicacies. Jianchun said a few words to the people of the 8 clans before they all sat down. I have long heard that Brother Yang Yutian possesses extraordinary talent and reached class 6 despite only being 24, with talent in practicing radiant arts approaching class 7. In the beginning, I didn't believe it, but after seeing you two, I realized Brother Yang Yutian really is a dragon among men. Brother Yang Yutian must have gained much from 3 months of seclusion in the Radiant Saint Tower. The speaker was an old man and a member of the Qilong clan. His status was extremely great, as he was also a class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Jianchun chuckled. The old senior must be praising me. I've indeed made a few slight gains from the Radiant Saint Tower. My trip to the Radiant Saint Tower has overturned my understanding towards Radiant Saint Masters. What slight gains, it's clearly a huge harvest. Quan Yukai muttered to himself rather unhappily beside Jianchun, as he disagreed with what Jianchun had said very much. Even though Quan Yotsai's voice was relatively soft, it was heard by everyone there. They all immediately gazed towards Quan Yukai, especially some of the class 6 Radiant Saint Masters there. They all looked at Quan Yukai with a great jealousy. I have long heard Master Quan Yukai has raised his abilities of radiant arts to an extremely high level and challenged the expert who ranked 7th of the 10 great Radiant Saint Masters. And it ended in a draw. After 100 years of hard work, Master Quan Yotsai's strength surely has increased by quite a lot. The speaker was an average-looking middle-aged man. His tone was relatively cold. He wore long, white robes with a blue badge on his chest. He was also a class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Quan Yukai chuckled. Of course. 100 years ago, my strength was equal to Li Maxin. But after 100 years, Li Maxin definitely is no longer my opponent. Speaking up to there, Quan Yukai suddenly stared at the middle-aged man with an ill intention and giggled. Sadarlanka. You also hold the position in the 10 great class 6 Radiant Saint Masters and you're ranked 6th. When we have time, why don't we exchange some pointer? An undetectable coldness flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes, but his expression remained unchanged. He said indifferently, perfect. When I have the time, we can properly exchange some pointers. Chapter 742. Killing Intent on the Ferry. 2. Jianchun's gaze towards Quan Yukai carried some astonishment. He did not think that Quan Yukai, someone as thick-skinned as a pig and rather unreliable, would actually possess the strength to challenge the 10 great class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. For the first time, there was some change to Jianchun's opinion of Quan Yukai. He could not help but believe what Quan Yukai had said to Lin Bai about how he had a rather great attainment in radiant arts slightly, though it was only slightly. Noticing Jianchun's change, Quan Yukai immediately revealed a smile that he believed to be enchanting and giggled at Jianchun. How is it, Brother Yang Yutian? Do you finally believe it now? I, Quan Yukai, am not as deplorable as you've described. If you discuss matters with me, an esteemed class 6 Radiant Saint Master, not only will you not suffer losses, it'll even benefit you extremely greatly at my expenses. Shouldn't you give this a serious consider? Jianchun shook his head with a slight smile. He did not say anything, though he thought to himself, this Quan Yukai really does harp on those 3 great radiant arts. 3 months ago, I heard that Brother Yang Yutian has unprecedented talent and is a modern prodigy. Not only have you reached class 6 at a young age of 24, your talent in practicing radiant arts is close to one of a class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Currently, it's getting closer and closer by the day to the fight for a chance at breaking through to class 7. The elimination competition will begin in a month's time. I wonder how confident Brother Yang Yutian is for obtaining a position in the top 10? A luxuriously robed old man said. He was the one in control for the Ho clan, Master Ho. He was also a class 6 Radiant Saint Master. The remaining members of the clans at the tables all cast their gazes towards Jianchun. They clearly cared very much about the answer to the question. Hearing Master Ho's question, Quan Yukai immediately revealed a shocked expression. He stared fixedly at Jian Chen, clearly also astounded by Jian Chen's age and talent. However, he recovered soon after and thought to himself, no wonder this Yang Yutian can break through the seals to those 3 radiant arts. His talent for radiant arts actually approaches class 7. Though I wonder about his current strength, and to what level he can use radiant arts. Jian Chen smiled. Master Ho is too kind. It was only because I was rather lucky that I reached class 6 so quickly. However, in regards to the elimination battle in a month's time, I'm not confident that I will obtain a position in the top 10, but I will definitely give it my all. I, Cheng Jian, believe brother Yang Yutian will definitely enter the top 10. After all, Yang Yutian's talent for radiant arts is almost similar to a class 7, radiant saint master, exceeding all of us. I trust that placing within the top 10 is nothing difficult for brother Yang Yutian. Here, let us celebrate in advance for brother Yang Yutian in obtaining a place in the top 10 in the name of the Cheng family, said the refined middle-aged man of the Cheng family as he raised his glass of wine towards Jian Chen. After drinking the wine, Chang Jian continued, Brother Yang Yutian, I have a proposal. In the elimination battle a month away, why don't we work together? That way, both our chances at placing top 10 will greatly increase. I wonder how brother Yang Yutian feels about it. Brother Yang Yutian, Cheng Jian's proposal is pretty good. If we work together, our chances at the top 10 will greatly increase. As soon as Cheng Jian finished what he was saying, an old man spoke out. Master Ho began to laugh. Whenever it is the time of the elimination battle, the 8 great clans of the City of God will almost always work together. Brother Yang Yutian, why don't you work together with us? That way, the chance of survival inside will be much greater than when you are alone. Afterwards, the remaining people of different clans all spoke out to invite Jian Chen to join them. They knew that Jian Chen's future accomplishments would greatly exceed their own, just from looking at his talent. Jian Chen did not accept the invitations of the 8 clans. He hesitated for a while, and during that time, he could not help but remember the words spoken by the president. Right now, the Holy Empire is not so peaceful, so it's best to avoid getting too close with organizations related to the 3 great clans. Thinking up to there, Jian Chen made his decision. He said apologetically to the people, I understand everyone has good intentions, but in the battle a month away, I do happen to have my own plans, so I am unable to be with everyone. What Jian Chen had said immediately caused many people at the tables to change in expression. Even the lively atmosphere seemed to freeze at that instant, and in the next moment, the deck of the ferry became abnormally quiet. That even the sound from a dropped needle could be heard clearly. A while later, the heavy atmosphere was finally broken. Brother Yang Yutian, you must consider well. Going by yourself is extremely dangerous, making it extremely difficult to place within the top 10 in the end. It was an old man who spoke up, and he came from the Fire God clan. Jian Chen rejected him without any hesitation. I thank everyone's good intentions, but I have already made up my mind, so there is no need to say any more. At the dining tables, the expressions of a few people became stern, while an undetectable silver of coldness flashed across the eyes of others. At this moment, the dozing white tiger on Jian Chen's shoulder suddenly opened its eyes, staring fixedly at the surface of the river. Suddenly, the calm river surface was broken. 30 people in dark clothing leapt out, lunging towards the tables at lightning speed, as they flickered with colored lights from different attributed saint force. No one was spared, with Jian Chen, Quan Yukai and people of the 8 clans becoming their targets for attack. Protect Master Ho! Protect the young master! On the ferry, the guards of the 8 clans immediately sprinted onto the deck, retreating quickly and protecting their masters, while rushing up to some of the dark-clothed people, engaging in intense battles. Fuck, around 30 Heaven Saint Masters. What a large scale. Quan Yukai cried out in alarm. A ball of white clouds formed below his feet, and he disappeared from the deck of the ferry in the blink of an eye. He fled faster than a rabbit. Of the 30-odd Heaven Saint Masters, around 20 of them went for the 8 clans, while the remaining dozen or so all went for Jianshan. The 8 clans all possessed Heaven Saint Master guards who guarded their masters tightly and retreated from the deck as they repelled the attacks from the dark-clothed men. All the people of the 8 clans displayed stern expressions. They had brought plenty of Earth Saint Master guards, but there were only a dozen or so Heaven Saint Masters, which was a great gap to the number of people trying to kill them. Not long after the battle began, the people of the 8 clans were slowly forced into the hold of the ship. There were also many guards of the 8 clans that had been injured from the attacks, covered in blood. Suddenly, a ball of dazzling light illuminated the pitch-black sky and purged the sky of much of its darkness. A few highly regarded Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters of the clans all struck out, and each cast radiant arts from their hands towards the dark-clothed men. Currently, the people of the 8 clans had already been forced below the deck by the 20-odd assassins, while Jianshan remained seated at the dining tables, perfectly calm and collected, while holding his head up high against the disaster. As for his surroundings, there were already a dozen or so men who had locked onto him and currently approached him at lightning speeds. A powerful ripple of energy originated from behind him. 3 assassins approached Jianshan first, and lunging at him. With their saint weapons glowing with a special attributed light, they were chock full of saint force. The corner of Jianshan's lips curled into a mocking smile. He tilted his head and downed the glass of good wine. Without even looking backwards, he said softly, "Radiant Saint Shield." The surrounding Radiant Saint force began to gather around Jianshan at an unbelievable pace, and formed a silvery shield with a diameter of a meter, blocking the strikes behind Jianshan. Although the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters were battling against the assassins, they would always subconsciously glance past Jianshan. When they witnessed how quickly Jianshan had congealed the Radiant Saint shield, they were all astounded. Jianshan's speed at pulling up Radiant Saint force was something they could not achieve even at full strength, and looking at Jianshan's unfazed demeanor, he did not even seem to give it his all. This young Yutian really does possess talent for radiant arts that approaches Class 7. Just his speed of condensing a Radiant Saint shield is already much greater than us. Several Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters thought to themselves. At this moment, the saint weapons of the 3 Heaven Saint Masters simultaneously collided with Jianshan's Radiant Saint shield, and carried along with the weapons a powerful ripple of energy. The Radiant Saint shield, completely condensed of Radiant Saint force, seemed like an extremely sturdy piece of steel. Each time it was struck, it gave off a great loud clang, so deafening that it had become rather painful. Although the Radiant Saint shield had blocked the simultaneous attacks of the 3 Heaven Saint Masters, it was covered in a layer of spiderweb cracks. Shortly afterwards, Jianshan pointed gently towards the shield, and it immediately shattered with a loud sound. It turned into countless small pieces of shrapnel, and shot towards the 3 Heaven Saint Masters at lightning speed like a white rain. The expressions of the 3 Heaven Saint Masters changed slightly. Vigorous saint force immediately surged from their bodies, and formed a barrier around their bodies to receive the shield shrapnel. The Radiant Saint shield can actually be used like that. I've really widened my understanding today. Brother Yang Yutian really is impressive. You actually discovered an attack like that. Quan Yukai stared fixedly at Jianshan from the hold of the shift, and sighed with praise. But Brother Yang Yutian needs to receive the attacks of a dozen or so Heaven Saint Masters at the same time. Can he endure it? Should I help him out? Quan Yukai thought for a little before speaking. Never mind. Although I, Quan Yukai, indeed has some strength, I'm helpless against so many Heaven Saint Masters. And since Brother Yang Yutian seems so confident, let's just observe the situation first, and have a look at Brother Yang Yutian's strength in the meantime. Radiant Saint Sword. Jianshan did not pause in his actions. Just as the Radiant Saint shield transformed into countless fragments and shot towards the 3 Heaven Saint Masters, a huge sword around 2 meters in length immediately condensed in front of him. With a swing of his hand, the giant sword became a white flash, and sped towards another black-clothed assassin. The assassin did not treat the Radiant Saint sword too importantly. To him, although Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters possessed a certain level of offense, it was still not enough to threaten him much less a young man in his 20s. However, when the Radiant Saint sword collided with the assassin's saint weapon, it immediately produced a great bang. The man's expression changed greatly, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, as he was knocked backward with great force by the Radiant Saint sword. Just a single Radiant Saint sword from Jian Chun had caused a powerful Heaven Saint Master to vomit blood and retreat. This had caused all the other assassins who surrounded Jian Chun to be surprised, and just stare at Jian Chun in disbelief. Impossible, since when did Radiant Saint sword become so powerful? An assassin could not control himself and exclaimed aloud. Chapter 743. Killing Intent on the Fairy 3. Everyone be careful. This person's radiant arts are much more powerful than other Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. A 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master called out to alert his companions before he used his full strength. As the great Radiant Saint force constantly surged into his saint weapon, it also began to glow greatly before he swung it at Jian Chun. An extremely great sword chi shot out from the assassin's saint weapon. It shot forwards like a lightning bolt and carried a sliver of pressure that originated from the world. At the same time, another 4 assassins around Jian Chun swung their saint weapons in a similar fashion. They all shot out a powerful sword chi at Jian Chun. Each sword chi carried slivers of pressure that originated from the world, which locked tightly onto Jian Chun. You even dare to make a fool of yourself with mere earth-tier battle skills. A sliver of disdain appeared on Jian Chun's face. He slowly unfolded his hands from his chest and called out, "Radiant Saint Sword. Radiant Saint Shield." The surrounding Radiant Saint force quickly began to move violently. It gathered around Jian Chun's hands at an unbelievable speed, and formed into 4 Radiant Saint swords that radiated with soft light around Jian Chun's left hand, while a giant, 3-meter-wide shield appeared near Jian Chun's right hand. The scene caused the Class 6 Radiant Saint Master to stare wide-eyed once again. How is this possible? Yang Yutian actually condensed 4 Radiant Saint swords and a Radiant Saint shield together in such a short time. Master Ho was no longer able to remain calm. He stared dumbfoundedly at Jian Chun, as if he had just witnessed something impossible. Heavens! Brother Yang Yutian's strength is just too impressive. Not only can he simultaneously condense 4 Radiant Saint swords and a Radiant Saint shield, the speed it took him is several times greater than me. My God, just how does he do it? Quan Yotsai's mouth was agape, while the shock in his heart had already reached an unreturnable state. Brother Yang Yutian indeed is very powerful. With just a single hand, he's done something that completely surpassed all of us. Even the person who places first in the top 10 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters probably can't cast 5 Radiant Arts at the same time to such a level. The refined, middle-aged man of the Chung family sighed emotionally in his heart. His gaze towards Jian Chun was filled with shock and disbelief. Sar Lunka stared sternly at Jian Chun. His eyes flickered with a gleam of light, and he said softly, "This Yang Yutian is much stronger than I've anticipated. What a pity that he's unwilling to join us. Once the battle starts, we'll become enemies sooner or later." The old man from the Fire God clan said softly, also with a gleam of light flickering in his eyes. Hearing that, a cold light flashed across Soderlunka's eyes, and he said no more. Swish, 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 swish. With 4 ear-piercing whooshes, the 4 Radiant Saint swords formed streaks of white light that rushed towards the 4 Heaven Saint Masters and their Earth-tier battle skill sword chi. Bang! The 4 Radiant Saint swords collided with the 4 sword chis, and immediately produced a great sound of collision. As they slammed into each other, the Radiant Saint swords and the sword chi actually collapsed at the same time mid-air. It formed a violent energy which rippled in all directions. It caused the largest ferry of Fragrance River, the Inky Stratus, to rock from side to side, while the waves created reached several meters high. The dark sky was completely illuminated from the white light given off by the Radiant Saint swords as they collapsed. Jian Chun immediately used his right hand to block his chest. The Radiant Saint shield seemed to be pulled along by an invisible force, and it followed Jian Chun's right hand and moved from Jian Chun's side to right in front of him. As it floated there, it helped Jianchen block the havoc-wreaking energy ripples. At the same time, a few remaining assassins flew in from behind Jianchen and swiped at him with their saint weapons at the same time. A cold light flashed across Jianchen's eyes. The radiant saint shield remained in front him, but he called out with a deep voice. Radiance burst. As soon as he finished speaking, the radiant saint force in a radius of 5 kilometers immediately became violent. The originally gentle, sheep-like radiant saint force actually suddenly became explosive, like a vicious tiger, and it all gathering around Jianchen in less than half a second. They became raindrop-sized balls of white light, and each carried a forceful energy, as if it was sharp sword qi that was capable of piercing rock. At the same time, the radiant saint swords in the hands of the clan members quickly began to dim, and disappeared soon after. Afterwards, a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master cried out in astoundment. How is this possible? All the Radiant Saint force in a radius of 5 kilometers has all disappeared. The Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters all revealed extremely astonished expressions, and they gazed at each other. The shock in their hearts had already reached a limit. They were not even able to speak anymore. All the Radiant Saint force in a radius of 5 kilometers had been sucked clean, so that even they were unable to continue casting radiant arts. They had lived for so long, yet this was something they had never encountered. Brother Yang Yutian, you're just too impressive. You've actually sucked up all the Radiant Saint force in the surrounding area, so that even other Radiant Saint Masters are no longer able to cast radiant arts. My admiration for you surges like the endless waves of the river. Brother Yang Yutian, from today onwards you are my idol. Quan Yukai stared at Jianchen in interest, and his face was covered with an expression of admiration. Jianchen's expression was cold, as if he did not realize how great of an impact he was to the Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters of the 8 clans. Cold light flickered in his eyes, and a sharp but undetectable killing intent appeared. He called out with a deep voice, Radiance bursts go! With Jianchen's gesture, the countless points of light formed from Radiant Saint force surged at the assassins behind him, like a moth lunging at a fire. The powerful strength Jianchen had displayed before was witnessed by all the black-clothed assassins. So even against such an underwhelming attack, they did not dare to be complacent at all. Vast amounts of Radiant Saint force immediately surged violently from their bodies, forming a thick barrier around them to block the attack from the points of light. At the same time, they swung their saint weapons constantly and smashed the points of light. The specks of light formed from Radiant Saint force seemed insignificant, but each speck carried a powerful and sharp force. As soon as they collided with the saint weapons in the hands of the assassins, they gave out consecutive metallic screeches. Arg! An assassin gave out a mournful cry. The specks of light had broken through his protection formed from saint force, piercing deeply into his body. The great pain caused him to cry out, "Help me!" on impulse. Although the specks of light was blocked for the other assassins, the situation for them was not great either. The specks were just too densely packed, as numerous as rain. Many of the specks broke through the swings of their saint weapons and collided with the barrier formed from Radiant Saint force, causing it to tremble greatly. This fucking thing is just too powerful. My protection from saint force can't hold much longer. It's going to fail soon. Retreat. An assassin with a shaking barrier cursed aloud. He gave up on this opportunity to attack Jianchen, and quickly retreating backwards. Is this goddamn Radiant Saint Master Class 6 or Class 7? Why is he so overpowered? We actually can't get any closer to him. Several assassins all swore aloud. They were all forced back by Jianchen's radiance burst, and were forced to give up on their attack and protect themselves. Do you just want to retreat like this? How can it be so easy? A sneer formed on Jianchen's face, and with a deep voice, Radiant Saint soared. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 white streaks of light suddenly began to flash, as they quickly flew towards the ferry and struck at one of the retreating assassins. He actually condensed a Radiant Saint sword from over 5 kilometers away, and then got them to fly in. When the Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters witnessed what was happening, they were immediately dumbfounded. This Yang Yutian really is so skilled to be able to do such a maneuver. He condensed a radiant saint sword over 5 kilometers away, and then controlled the swords to fly in from so far away. Unbelievable. The Class 6, Radiant Saint Master from the Chung family mumbled at a slight loss. As for Soderlanka, his expression became extremely ugly, while the complexions of the members from other clans fluctuated. Be careful from behind. An assassin discovered the 3 radiant saint swords flying in from the distance, and immediately cried out to warn his companions. Meanwhile, his eyes were wide open as he stared at the 3 faraway radiant saint swords with disbelief. The 3 swords actually flew in from over 5 kilometers away. Hearing the cry of warning, the other black-clothed assassins all noticed the radiant saint swords flying in from behind. Each was greatly surprised. The 3 radiant saint swords directly shot towards one person each. The swords possessed strength equivalent to the full-powered blow from a heaven saint master. As the first sword collided with the person's saint weapon, it knocked him backwards quickly, while he produced a muffled cough from his throat. He was already heavily injured. Before the person could even return to his senses, a second sword shot towards him. Although it was successfully blocked by the person, he spat out a mouthful of blood onto his hand, which held the saint weapon that had already become numb from the clash. His right hand with the radiant weapon drooped powerlessly. Closely afterwards, the 3rd Radiant Saint Force sword attacked the heavily injured man, basically right after the second sword. It pierced the man's chest, and when it had entered halfway, it suddenly exploded, and blasting the assassin's body to shreds. Even his soul was unable to escape, instantly killing him. A Heaven Saint Master had fallen by the hands of a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master just like this, not to mention the fact that it was under a situation of many against one, attacking from all directions. After killing a Heaven Saint Master, Jian Chen did not show any happy emotions. His expression remained just as cold, while powerful killing intent exuded from his eyes. He then pointed his right hand at the sky with his head held up, and gazed at the pitch-black sky. Judgment Sword. Chapter 744. The Strength of God's Descent. What? Judgment Sword? Is it one of the 3 great Class 7 radiant arts, Judgment Sword? The people from the 8 clans were immediately astounded, and stared at Jian Chen in absolute disbelief. Impossible. Yang Yutian is only a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. How can he obtain the secret manual to practicing Judgment Sword? I heard that it's impossible to obtain it without being Class 7, and also impossible to practice. Yang Yutian must be faking it. It's a bluff. How is it possible for him to cast one of the 3 great radiant arts, Judgment Sword? The Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters of the 8 clans all spoke out. Most of them did not believe that Jian Chen could really use Judgment Sword. Impossible. It's only been so long and Brother Yang Yutian can already use the 3 great radiant arts. Is he not Class 7 but instead Class 7? Quan Yukai, who was hiding in the hold of the ship, stuck out his head, staring fixedly at Jian Chen. At this moment, a white light appeared in the distant horizon, illuminating the pitch-black sky. It created a unique scene, which attracted the attention of countless people on the distant riverbanks. The white rays of light were all Radiant Saint Force that gathered towards Jian Chen from 5 kilometers away. Jian Chen pointed at the sky with one finger. The vast quantities of Radiant Saint Force quickly condensed at the tip of his finger, and soon condensed into a silvery white holy sword, 10 meters in length. The sword radiated with dazzling light, and dyed the entire area snow white. Moreover, there was a surging pressure that originated from the sword, which caused the surrounding space to become sticky. When the other Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters faced the pressure, they even struggled to breathe. Jian Chen stood perfectly straight on the deck of the ferry, under the silvery white sword. He seemed just like a god, standing between the earth and the heavens. His cold expression and sharp gaze were filled with a certain sternness, as if he was holy and could not be offended. This is really the Judgment Sword. A Radiant Saint Master of the 8 clans cried out with a trembling voice. No, that's not the true Judgment Sword. The true Judgment Sword would cause a phenomenon several times greater than it is now. Although Yang Yutian has cast Judgment Sword, it's only a small portion of the true Judgment Sword. Master Ho said with a low voice. Even though the judgment sword cast by Jian Chun was far from the true arte in terms of strength, it was still an incomparable deed in their eyes. The expressions of the assassins who had surrounded Jian Chun became extremely ugly, and they cried out, "This is bad. This is one of the three great radiant arts, Judgment Sword. It can even kill saint rulers. Retreat, you definitely cannot be locked on by it. No one can escape it alive." Hearing that, the assassins in the surroundings immediately dispersed, flying into the distance as they fled. Suddenly, Jian Chun swung his hand. The sword condensed on the tip of his finger transformed into a streak of silvery white light, and shot towards the slower assassins at the back like a lightning bolt. The sword was extremely fast, not allowing the assassins to escape at all. It passed through them, but the places it had cut through were not fatal. However, the sword was the Judgment Sword, one of the three great radiant arts, so it carried an extremely great energy, killing them instantly. Jian Chun's two eyes seemed to explode with a flickering of light, like two lanterns in the dark night. In the next moment, his presence actually formed an extremely wondrous connection with the Judgment Sword. After the sword slaughtered the assassins, it had actually continued to pursue the other darkly clothed men. Under Jian Chun's control with the speed of the Judgment Sword, it had killed another 3 assassins in less than a second. Afterwards, it continued to pursue the other with no change in speed. No, this isn't the real Judgment Sword. The real Judgment Sword's strength is definitely not just this. Whatever. Since we can't run, we might as well work together and cast a heaven-tier battle skill together to break that incomplete Judgment Sword. An assassin clearly understood the radiant arte, so he called out immediately to try and save them. The remaining few assassins all gathered together, casting heaven-tier battle skills simultaneously. Immediately, a powerful pressure began to permeate the surroundings, locking tightly onto the sword that shot over. A few heaven-tier battle skills shot from the hands of the assassins and collided violently with the sword mid-air. Boom! Followed by a deafening rumble, the sword and the several heaven-tier battle skills collapsed together in the middle of the sky. The powerful energy ripples wreaked havoc on the surroundings, lifting up the water below to a height of a dozen or so meters. Even the ferry was greatly affected, with huge cracks appearing on the deck. It soon covered the entire ferry, while the bow of the ferry was essentially destroyed. The several dark-clothed assassins were knocked backwards by the powerful energy ripple. Even with the radiant saint shield covering Jian Chun in front, it caused Jian Chun to take several steps back after receiving the energy ripples with the shield. On the other side, the 8 clans had already stopped their battles with the 20-odd assassins. All of them gazed at Jian Chun. As a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master, the arte cast by Jian Chun all by himself had shocked them all. Of the dozen or so Heaven Saint Masters that surrounded him, close to 10 were already dead, while there were only the last few remaining. The 20-odd assassins around the members of the 8 clans, and the other Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters looked at each other. Afterwards, the assassins seemed to be connected on a mental level, all abandoning the people of the 8 clans, and rushed at Jian Chun. At that time, all of their gazes became icily cold, including the people of the 8 clan. Powerful killing intent began to permeate from them, clearly making up their minds to actually kill Jian Chun. A dozen or so of the assassins all attacked Jian Chun with their strongest attack in a circle, while the others shot into the sky. They floated high in the sky, charging up their heaven-tier battle skills. Seeing that, Quan Yotsai's expression changed greatly. He mumbled in a voice which only he could hear. Mother of God, the people of the 8 clans are going too far. Are they trying to silence him by killing him? Yang Yutian's the disciple of the president. If they do that, wouldn't they offend the president? Sigh. It's such a pity that I only have this much strength. It's certain death for against so many Heaven Saint Masters. I don't even have the chance of escaping. Brother Yang Yutian, it's not that I don't want to help you, it's that I really can't. I hope you are able to survive without harm. If anything really happens to you, I will definitely report it to the president and get him to take revenge for you. Feeling the killing intent from the darkly clothed assassins, Jian Chun's gaze became completely frozen over. A powerful killing intent began to permeate from his heart. Master Yang Yutian, you leave quickly. I'll block them. A heavy voice appeared. It was Yang Ling, standing in front of Jian Chun, and blocking him with his large body. His expression was determined. At this moment, Yang Ling had already accepted death. Even if he had to die here, he needed to let Jian Chun escape safely. Looking at Yang Ling's muscular body, Jian Chun was deeply moved. His gaze became complicated. He could clearly feel that Yang Ling had already accepted his death. To die for someone who he had only known for less than 3 days, and did not have any particular feelings for. At that very moment, Jian Chun's impression of Yang Ling skyrocketed. Yang Ling, who stood in front of Jian Chun, had no clue about how his status in Jian Chun's heart had already underwent a great change. He gave out a long roar to the sky, and rushed towards the dozen or so assassins with a giant sword in his hand, and without any fear. He carried a spirit with no fear in death. Even though Yang Ling was a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master, the dozen assassins had an advantage in numbers after all. Also, they were not weak, with several being 5th cycle Heaven Saint Masters. As a result, as soon as he began fighting with them, he was suppressed by people at a similar level to him. Afterwards, he was struck in the chest with palm strikes from 2 assassins, causing him to spray blood from his mouth, already heavily injured. In the end, 3 saint weapons were thrust ruthlessly at his body, punching holes in his chest, heart and his dantian. Master Yang Yutian, leave. Yang Ling gave a heart-wrenching roars as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He used his own body to stop a few assassins from moving, to give time for Jian Chun to run. Although Yang Ling knew Jian Chun was very strong, he was facing up against over 20 Heaven Saint Masters, with several of them charging Heaven-tier battle skills at the same time. Once they struck forth with the battle skills, even 6th cycle Heaven Saint Masters would die, without a doubt, not to mention the fact that Jian Chun had already gone through several battles before, consuming all the Radiant Saint force in a radius of 5 kilometers. He had already expended a lot of his energy. Even if he currently still had some ability to fight, he was not able to resist against 20 Heaven Saint Masters working together in Yang Ling's eyes. This was why Yang Ling had accepted death to make time for Jian Chun to escape, because he was responsible for Jian Chun's safety. Jian Chun stared dumbfoundedly as the 3 saint weapons pierced Yang Ling's body. His killing intent had already reached the absolute limit as he said icily, "None of you will be leaving today." Jian Chun quickly formed a weird seal with his 2 hands, slowly closing his eyes. At that moment, he seemed to fuse with the world. Suddenly, there was an extremely bright light that appeared in the pitch-black sky. It was as dazzling as the sun above the 9 heavens. It illuminated the entire area, not only painting the surrounding river in a near bright like daytime glow, it even illuminated a small portion of the city of God, 10 kilometers away. It alarmed countless people in the city. What's this? The sudden change caused the 20-odd assassins to stop. They all looked into the sky, astounded. What is that thing? On the ferry, the Class 6, Radiant Saint Master raised their heads one after another to look at the sky, all bearing shocked expressions. Within the city of God, a dozen or so people appeared from nowhere above 8 huge manors. They gazed at the powerful white light in the sky several dozen kilometers away. The depths of their eyes were filled with great worry. That's the Forbidden Arte God's Descent. There's a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master casting the Forbidden Arte. No, this is different from how it's described in the records. Although it's caused a great commotion, its strength seems a little weaker. Yep. This God's Descent seems strong, but it's actually nothing. It can only pose some non-lethal threats to 1st or 2nd Heaven Layer Saint rulers. In the headquarters of the Radiant Saint Master Union, the president, who sat cross-legged on the top floor, cultivating, suddenly snapped open his eyes. He arrived beside the window in a flash, and gazed into the distance in shock. He mumbled, "That's the God's Descent. No, that's the incomplete version. It only possesses the form but not the power. I actually can't feel any origin energy in it. Just which prodigy discovered a method like this? Although the Arte's strength will greatly diminish when cast like this, it doesn't require the offering of longevity. No, I must go and see." On a white cloud, The president shot out from the window into the distance like a lightning bolt. Chapter 745. Arrival of the president on the Inky Stratus. The near 20 darkly clothed assassins were astounded by the phenomenon that had occurred. At that moment, a strong feeling of uneasiness had suddenly appeared in all their minds. Everyone quickly kill him. We must not let him cast that arte. An assassin cried out, before rushing at Jianchen first, no longer paying any attention to Jianchen's strength. Afterwards, the remaining assassins all returned to their senses and rushed at Jianchen, wanting to disperse Jianchen's radiant arte while he was still charging up. Although many of them had no idea what radiant arte it was, they understood just how powerful it was just from the great commotion caused by it. In the sky, the assassins who could use heaven-tier battle skills also completed their preparations. A great pressure weighed down on the area, locking tightly onto Jianchen. God's descent. A ripple, visible with the naked eye, quickly spread out from Jianchen in all directions. Wherever the ripple passed by, it would cause the space to instantly freeze. The assassins who rushed at Jianchen were all frozen in various poses, unable to move at all. In that moment, time seemed to stop. All the people of the 8 clans were also trapped by the invisible force. The ferry stopped floating along the river water stopped flowing, and even the breeze completely disappeared. The several people in the sky who had completely charged up their heaven-tier battle skills and were ready to cast them were forcefully locked in place. The vast energy corralled the shapeless power of the battle skills, without a single sliver leaking out at all. The entire world went silent in that moment. The only change was with the white light in the sky, where it became brighter and brighter, more and more dazzling before in the end, it descended from the sky as a huge light pillar, 100 meters in length, encasing everyone present within it. Jianchen maintained a weird hand seal, standing close-eyed on the deck of the ferry. In the moment he was enveloped by the pillar of light, he felt a wondrous connection form between his mind and the pillar. In the area encased by the pillar, it seemed to become a different domain. In the domain, Jianchen was God, the all-powerful God, the God that controls life. Unless someone possessed strength that exceeded the domain, and exceeded the absolute limits of the domain, no one could escape its judgment. The several heaven-tier battle skills in the air quickly dispersed, turning into strands of energy of the world, and disappeared into the surroundings. Shortly afterwards, the dark-clothed assassins who had cast the heaven-tier battle skills began to slowly turn into dust at an observable rate, disappearing into the sky. Shortly afterwards, the 20-odd men on the deck slowly began to disintegrate too, turning into dust. There was no blood, nor any clothes left behind. Even the spatial rings they wore on their fingers turned into dust, disappearing into the world. It was extremely strange. In the blink of an eye, over 30 Heaven Saint Master assassins died, with no one spared. Even though it was an incomplete God's descent, its strength was nothing Heaven Saint Masters could resist. When all the assassins had passed away, the giant pillar of light that had descended from the sky quickly disappeared. All those who were trapped inside also regained their mobility, and the frozen time began to flow again. The ferry broke through the water, and the river water also began to flow slowly, producing light splashing sounds. Jianchen slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with fatigue. His straight body on the deck seemed to suddenly be blown around in powerful winds, tottering about. Although the God's Descent and Judgment Sword were both known as one of the 3 great radiant arts, the God's Descent was a forbidden technique after all. Their strength could not be compared. Just from the single casting of God's Descent, it had almost sucked Jianchen's soul dry. At this moment, Jianchen's eyelids were extremely heavy. Even keeping his eyes open was an extremely difficult task, and his brain currently throbbed with a great headache. His current status was like a normal person who had not slept for 3 days. Not only was he extremely exhausted, he had overexerted his mind, creating extremely great pain that was difficult to bear with. The people of the 8 clans all stood there absolutely dumbfounded, but they returned to their senses without much time. Although they were immobilized before, they could still think, witnessing the unbelievable scene clearly. Over 20 Heaven Saint Masters were turned to dust, bit by bit, just like that from the white pillar of light, without any resistance. They could not even struggle. It caused great shock to them. After all, the person who had done that was not a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master, but a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master, the same of them. Not to mention it was a 24-year-old. Many streaks of white light cut across the dark sky, quickly flying over from the distance, before stopping right about Fragrance River. The first person was a ruddy white-robed old man. Beneath him was a cloud completely formed from Radiant Saint Force. He seemed like an immortal. The person was the president of the Radiant Saint Master Union, and behind him, there were many Class 7, Radiant Saint Master Elders. Within them included the 9th Elder, 14th Elder and 5th Elder, who Jianshun had met before. The president quickly glanced across the inky stratus, stopping as soon as he reached the exhausted Jianshun. A sliver of shock flashed across his face and he cried out, "Yang Yutian, did you cast that god's descent from before?" Jianshun stared at the president in the sky rather lifelessly and said, "Yang Yutian greets Master. Master has guessed correctly. The god's descent from before was indeed cast by disciple, though it is incomplete." The shock on the president's face became stronger and stronger. Even the elder who stood behind the president stared at Jianshun with a gaze of disbelief. "Yang Yutian, perhaps you've broken through the seals of the 3 great radiant arts?" the president asked once again. Jianshun nodded his head slightly. He no longer had the strength to speak anymore. Right now, he was quite tempted to just topple over on the spot and sleep soundly. Not only did the overexertion of his mind create great exhaustion and a great headache, it made Jianshun feel like his soul was about to disappear. "Ha ha ha ha, good. You are indeed my disciple. Yang Yutian, your actions have made me very impressed." The president began to laugh aloud. He was extremely joyful. With a gesture of his hand, a dense ball of Radiant Saint Force formed a cloud, pulling Jianshun from the ferry. He said with concern for the first time, "Yang Yutian, you've currently overexerted yourself. You need to quickly heal. I'll take you back." Shortly afterwards, the president looked towards the people of the 8 clans, and his gaze immediately turned into a glare. With a deep voice he said, "You 8 clans better know your place. Otherwise, even with the Tsar family covering you, my Radiant Saint Master Union will definitely not let you off." Hearing that, the expressions of the people all changed. It became dead silent immediately. Carrying Jianshun, the president flew from the area, directly proceeding to the headquarters of the Union. The 5th Elder looked at the bloody ferry and sighed softly. He thought to himself, "The people of the 8 clans have gone a little too far. Yang Yutian is someone highly regarded by the president after all. Fortunately he's fine, otherwise, perhaps the president's temper will be lit once again." The 5th Elder waved his hand, and a ball of gentle Radiant Saint Force immediately dragged the heavily injured Yang Ling into the sky. Afterwards, he followed behind the president, back to the headquarters of the Union. With their departure, all the people left were the people of the 8 clans, and the coward Quan Yukai. All of them stood there still badly shaken. The strength of God's descent had completely stunned them. "Sigh, what you've done this time is a little overboard. Though, fortunately the situation hasn't reached an irreparable level." An old voice resounded in the sky about the ferry, entering the ears of every person from the 8 clans. 10 meters above the ferry, a dozen or so people of different ages had already appeared at a certain time. They seemed to be a part of the world, without using any energy to float in the sky. They seemed more like ordinary people than anything else. The people of the 8 clans were all greatly shocked. They immediately knelt on the ground and called out, "Descendant greets the ancestor. Sigh, all of you go back now. Don't do something too obvious next time. Once people grab you by the handle, even the clan will be sucked into it. The Radiant Saint Master Union definitely cannot be provoked." An old man sighed gently. Waving his hand, he left with the white-robed Radiant Saint Master and Heaven Saint Master guard beside him. Afterwards, the ancestors of the various clans all left the ferry with their own clan members one by one. Soon, there was no one left on the deck of the ferry at all. They've all left, so why am I still staying here? The inky stratus in the most famous ferry of Fragrance River. Now that it's been so heavily damaged, the fees are probably quite high. It's quite fortunate that Brother Yang Yutian is fine, though Brother Yang Yutian's strength is a little too overwhelming. He can even cast the forbidden arte. I must learn the forbidden arte from Brother Yang Yutian. Yuan Yukai mumbled to himself as he walked out from the hold of the ship, before condensing a white cloud under his feet, leaving the ferry. Just when Quan Yukai was leaving, a middle-aged beauty ran out from the hold. She cried out in tears, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, the ferry was destroyed by you. You can't leave. How do I explain it to my boss?" "Piss off. What has it got to do with me, Quan Yukai? It's not like it was me who broke the ferry. If you want compensation, go find the 8 great clans. This is all because the 8 great clans asked for it, that they couldn't find anything better to do." The echoes of Quan Yotsai's voice could be heard from the sky. The voice grew fainter and fainter, before finally completely disappearing. Chapter 746. Outstanding Prodigy in the City of God. Jian Chun was brought to a quiet room at the headquarters of the Radiant Saint Master Union by the president. The president said with a gentle tone, "Yang Yutian, you should rest here. When you fully recover, come and find your master. Master has some things he wants to speak with you about." "Yes, master," Jian Chun replied courteously, before he entered the room. He sat cross-legged on the cushion in the room and slowly closed his eyes. The president glanced at Jian Chun with a smile. At that moment, his impression of his disciple already began to soar, because Jian Chun's performance tonight had even made the president hold him in high esteem. In the Ho clan of the 8 clans, Master Ho locked himself in a room, unwilling to see anyone after he was brought back by the ancestor of the clan. In the luxurious moment, Master Ho currently sat on his bed in deep thought. The light in his eyes constantly flickered, while his complexion constantly varied. Tonight on the ferry, the great strength displayed by Jian Chun had shocked Master Ho greatly, especially the scene where the strength of God's descent had slowly turned the 20-odd assassins to dust. It was like a brand, searing deeply into his mind, unable to be removed. He would never forget what he witnessed that night, never forget the strength of God's descent, much less forget the person who caused all of it, a 24-year-old. Yang Yutian. Yang. You. Tian. Master Ho mumbled to himself with a soft voice, and his gaze immediately turned into a glare. He said softly again, "Yang Yutian, I never thought you would actually be so strong. Not only do you have a grasp on the Judgment Sword, one of the 3 forbidden arts, you even know the most powerful forbidden arte, God's Descent, and you can successfully cast it. Perhaps even in all the Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters, you can reign supreme with such great strength. Too bad. Since you're unwilling to join hands with us 8 clans, we'll become enemies sooner or later in the competition in a month's time. We won't be able to avoid clashing with each other. And with what happened tonight, you'll probably realize soon that it was all organized by the 8 clans. We wanted to test you. Too bad none of us thought you'd be so strong, which caused our plan to completely spiral out of control. Whatever. Since there's already enmity between us, I can only go all in. Yang Yutian, just blame that you appeared at the wrong time." A sliver of killing intent flashed across Master Ho's eyes. Shortly afterwards, he gazed towards the door and called out in a deep voice, "Golden Guard." The door opened, and a person completely clad in golden armor walked in. He clasped his hands. "What does Master Ho require?" "Golden Guard, go contact the other 7 great clans. There's something important I want to discuss with them," Master Ho said. "Yes, Master Ho." The gold-armored guard left. In the Sauter clan, the average-looking middle-aged man, Sauter Lanka, currently sat on a lower seat in a grand hall with a dark expression. A sliver of powerful killing intent would flash across his eyes from time to time. At this moment, a purple-robed, dashing middle-aged man strode into the hall. He directly walked up the stair to a raised pomp and sat down on the central seat. "Lanka, just what has happened? Why have you alarmed the ancestor, who never comes out of seclusion?" The purple-robed man stared rather sternly at Sar Lanka down below, It's all because of Yang Yutian, father. Yang Yutian is really strong. He actually knows God's descent, a radiant arte where only class 7, radiant saint masters can cast. He wiped out all the people our 8 clans sent to test him. Sarlanka said with a soft voice. The purple-robed man's expression changed slightly, and he exclaimed with a deep voice. What? He knows God's descent. Perhaps he's already a class 7, radiant saint master? He's not class 7, and the God's descent he cast was not the true God's descent. He probably obtained the arte, and then found a method in which class 6, radiant saint masters could cast it. Sarlanka said, I recall that he only entered the radiant saint tower for a mere 3 months. It's unbelievable that he could reach such a level in 3 months. The purple-robed man gave out a sigh. Sarlanka stared fixedly at the middle-aged man and said, Father, Yang Yutian must be eliminated. Not only is his existence an obstruction to us placing top 10, it's also extremely bad for the Tsar family's plans. The purple-robed man could not make up his mind, so he did not reply immediately. You've put it well. This Yang Yutian must be eliminated. Suddenly, a heavy voice reverberated in the hall. In the center of the hall, a tightly dressed, middle-aged man had already appeared at a certain time. The middle-aged man's body was extremely muscled. He was stocky, and over 2 meters in height. His uncovered arms were clad with large muscles. His hair was several inches long, while his square face carried an unconcealed valiance. On his forehead, there was a heart-wrenching scar, which made him seem even more fierce. I greet the ancestor. The purple-robed man and Sarlanka bowed towards the large man at the same time. They were both extremely courteous. That person was the strongest and oldest ancestor of the Tsar clan, a powerful saint ruler. The ancestor stood there with his arms crossed. I already know about the matter with Yang Yutian. He is indeed an outstanding genius, and if he continues to grow, he will definitely become the president of the Union. It's just a pity that his existence interferes with the Tsar family's plans. The current president of the Union only has around 100 years before he'll pass away from old age. Without him, the Union will greatly weaken in the future, and with that, it'll become much easier for the Tsar family to control the Union. But in 100 years, Yang Yutian will be able to reach a great level similar to the president with his talent. So we have to eliminate him. Ancestor, is the idea of eliminating Yang Yutian from the Tsar family? The purple-robed man asked cautiously. The ancestor nodded slightly. Yes, ancestor, I'll immediately go organize this. This time, the purple-robed man did not hesitate at all. Remember, you must never send our own people to kill Yang Yutian, and you must not leave any evidence. The Tsar family wants to control the entire empire, and is about to declare war on the other 2 great clans. In such an important time, you definitely must not offend the neutral Union. The ancestor said with a deep voice. Afterwards, he suddenly disappeared from the hall. Just at this moment, a guard hurried in from outside. He knelt on one knee and said, Reporting to the Patriarch, Master Ho from the Ho clan has sent an invitation for the Patriarch and the young master to go to the Ho clan. There's something important to be discussed. I understand. You can leave. The purple-robed man waved his hand and dismissed the guard. Once the guard left, a sliver of light flashed across Sarlanka's eyes. He said, Master Ho has actually sent an invitation to discuss important matters right now. Father, I think this is most likely related to Yang Yutian. The purple-robed man nodded slightly. Since Master Ho has sent an invitation, let's go there through the secret tunnel. In the middle of the night, the huge city had already become extremely quiet. The wide streets were desolate, without anyone there at all. At this moment, in an area 100 meters below the Ho clan, there was a large basement, with a dozen or so striking people sitting around a long table. Everyone, I've invited everyone here for a reason. I believe most of you have already guessed it. Yes, the reason why I've invited everyone here today is to handle Yang Yutian. A powerful killing intent flashed across Master Ho's eyes. I'll be honest. Before I came here, I received a message from my ancestor to get us to eliminate Yang Yutian. This Yang Yutian's existence has already greatly impacted the Tsar family's plan. An old man in fiery red robes said. He was the one in control for the Fire God clan. Master Ho smiled slightly. I believe there's quite a few of you who've also received a similar message. Since it's like that, let us cut to the chase and discuss how we can handle Yang Yutian without using our own forces. I suggest we go find the assassination organizations to handle this. Those assassination organizations are good with assassination and are essentially impossible to guard against. If we let them handle it, not only will there be a greater chance in the task being completed, we won't be exposed either. A middle-aged man suggested. This is a decent idea. Of the three great assassination organizations, the baleful force of the Bloodsword sect is strange and mysterious. They can influence the target's mind in an undefendable way. Before the baleful force, even saint rulers will be affected. If we request the Bloodsword sect to move, perhaps even just a Heaven Saint Master is enough to handle Yang Yutian. It's a pity that after the battle between the three 1,000 years ago, the Bloodsword sect retired from the continent. It's as if the entire organization had suddenly vanished. They can't be found no matter how you look. Since it's impossible to find the Bloodsword sect, why don't we request for the other two assassination organizations? After the battle 1,000 years ago, although the Bloodsword sect, the Yamahal and the Underworld sect were all greatly damaged and went into hiding, the Yamahal and the Underworld sect have emerged again in the recent years. They've both just taken a lower profile than before, and our Zhou family already knows several of the places where they can be contacted. Then we might as well get the people from both the Yamahal and the Underworld sect at the same time. We 8 clans don't lack money. As long as they complete the mission, we'll make sure we fulfill them their best of our ability. After all discussions were completed, the people of the 8 clans all departed one by one, returning to their clans through the secret tunnels. In the luxurious estate of the Cheng family, the refined middle-aged man, Cheng Jian, currently stood with his head up, gazing at the dark sky. He sighed deeply. Cheng Jian's status in the Cheng family was quite great. He already knew all about the things that the 8 clans were about to do to Jian Chen, which made him could not help but feel helpless. According to what he originally thought, he wanted to become friends with Jian Chen, and even if he could not become friends, he would definitely not become an enemy of Jian Chen. However, things would often be unexpected. He had never thought that final situation would reach such a severe stage. Jian Chen actually provoked the Tsar family's killing intent. A genius, a true prodigy. A person with unprecedented talent has finally appeared on the continent with so much difficulty. And now his life is to be ended at such a young age. Cheng Jian gave out a deep sigh. His face was filled with regret. Chapter 747. The Grand Elder. The next morning, everything that happened at Fragrance River the night before spread throughout the city of God like fire. The news of several unknown Heaven Saint Masters attacking the 8 clans reverberated throughout the city, especially the huge pillar of light that descended from the sky in the end. It became a hot topic for discussion. For some time, no matter if it were the main streets, alleyways, inns or tea houses, the hubbub of people discussing what happened the night before at Fragrance River could be heard everywhere. Many people expressed different views to the topic, which soon created several versions of what happened spreading about. The 8 clans who directly caused it did not say anything on the matter, and all remained silent. Today, a figure shot towards the depths of the city of God like a lightning bolt, arriving outside the Radiant Saint Master Union headquarters, floating in the air. The person was a white-robed middle-aged man. He possessed a medium stature, while his head full of long hair was untied. It draped backwards rather casually, gently swaying in the breeze. His facial features were well defined, vaguely bearing his handsome appearance when he was still young. His eyes were extremely profound, vast like the starry sky, as if it contained a world inside. His arrival did not alert anybody. Even the people below continued to enter and exit the building, with no one realizing his existence. He seemed to be transparent. The middle-aged man floated before the huge castle of the Union. Gazing towards the highest tower, he said, "Adami, I've completed what you've requested me to do." At the highest tower that the man looked towards, An old man flew out on something that seemed like a cloud and arrived before the man. The old man was the president of the union. The president looked at the man with a smile, while a sliver of excitement flickered in the depths of his eyes. He said, "You've brought the essence blood of a soaring centipede? How's the quality?" A palm-sized white jade bottle appeared in the man's hand. He said with a smile, "Soaring centipedes are just so rare, especially high-class soaring centipedes. They're even less common. In order to find the soaring centipede you requested, I traveled the entire continent, before finally finding a soaring centipede that matched up to what you wanted on the Arctic continent, colonized by the 100 races. I spent a great effort before finally obtaining some essence blood from them." A sliver of shock flashed across the president's eyes. "How Wu? Even with your strength, you spent a great effort in obtaining the essence blood. Perhaps there were powerful people who interfered on the Arctic continent?" The man chuckled. "I met a few elders of the war god Hall on the continent, though we didn't end up fighting. That soaring centipede was rather strong though. It already evolved 7 colors, and it was at least as powerful as a 5th heavenly layer Saint King, also possessing its bloodline technique. I battled for 3 days and 3 nights with it, before finally obtaining some essence blood. This is from a 7-colored soaring centipede, so it should be enough for it to recover from being poisoned." "What? The essence blood of a 7-colored soaring centipede?" A sliver of joy flashed across the president's eyes, and he hurriedly followed up. "The essence blood from a 7-colored soaring centipede is much more potent than that from a 6-colored soaring centipede. With this bottle of blood, poison is no longer a problem. How Wu, you've really helped us out greatly this time." "Adami, don't put it like that. How can it be compared to saving my daughter's life? All right, since the item has been delivered, I shall be leaving first." As he spoke, he gazed into the distance of the city of God. There was a sliver of complicated emotions in his eyes. The president hesitated slightly before saying, "How Wu, you might not be at the Holy Empire, but you probably understand the situation with the Holy Empire very well. Won't you show some resistance and prevent what the Tsar family is currently doing? Do you really wish to see the Holy Empire fall into infighting? After all, this once was your home." The man sighed gently. His expression was extremely complicated. "How Wu, although so many years have passed, she still loves you dearly. You perhaps may be the only person who can change her decision. You should go talk to her," the president said earnestly. The man closed his eyes in some pain and waved his hand. "Adami, you should stop mentioning it. I'm ashamed to see her. It's me who is unworthy of her." The president sighed. "How Wu, if you don't go and intervene, perhaps my Radiant Saint Master Union will change owners after 100 years. Her intentions are not just swallowing the other 2 great clans. Adami, if she really moves against the Union, I will stop her." With that, the man did not stay any longer, turning around and flying out of the city of God. The president gazed deeply at the man as he disappeared into the distance. After a long while he sighed at the SK. He carried a helpless expression and entered the tower once again. At the same time, around 50 kilometers from the Union headquarters, a middle-aged beauty in a dark green dress floated silently. At an altitude of several kilometers, she stared into the distance with her slender eyes, displaying a complex expression. "It's been 3,000 years. 3,000 years. A whole 3,000 years. How Wu, have you really not come to see me, not even once? Do you know that even though you've made me heartbroken before, I've never hated you? I've really never hated you. I only hate the senior members of the clan. They prevented us from being together. If it were not for their interference, I would never do such things. How Wu, since you're unwilling to see me, I can only force you to see me in 100 years." The president directly entered the Union headquarters with the jade bottle of 7-colored soaring centipede essence blood. He went to a room in the depths of the building, and as soon as he opened the large door to the room, a warm, white light immediately poured out from inside. In the center of the room, there was a large bed, where a white-haired, wrinkle-faced old man currently slept in. By the side of the bed, there was a white-robed radiant saint master with a purple badge, constantly gathering and pouring radiant saint force into the old man. Towards the walls in the room, there were another 4 white-robed radiant saint masters, all sitting on the ground, cross-legged and eyes closed. They all possessed purple badges too, and were actually all Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters. Elder Ma, you should stop for now. I've brought the essence blood of a soaring centipede. The poison in the Grand Elder's body can finally be neutralized. As soon as the president entered the room, he spoke out. Hearing that, the Radiant Saint Master who constantly gathered Radiant Saint Force stopped. A sliver of exhaustion appeared on his face, but it was soon replaced by joy. Wonderful! The Grand Elder finally can be cured now. The 4 other Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters who sat by the walls recovering, all opened their eyes at the same time. They looked at each other, each revealing expressions of joy. At this moment, the old man who slept in the bed slowly opened his eyes. He said powerlessly, an old bag of bones has really caused quite a lot of trouble. The soaring centipede is a beast of antiquity, and the total amount of them present on the Tianyuan continent can be counted on one hand. So high-class soaring centipedes are even rarer. President, you must have paid a great price to obtain this essence blood. Grand Elder, you are the pillar of support for the Union. The Union is willing to pay an even greater price to save you. Come, consume the essence blood, and let's purge the poison from your body. The president opened the bottle lid, and slowly fed the Grand Elder the blood. As soon as the blood from the bottle came in contact with his mouth, the Grand Elder's complexion finally took a turn for the better. The poison in his body was currently receding quickly. Soon enough, the Grand Elder drank all the blood in the bottle. The president placed down the jade bottle and formed a weird hand seal in front of him. With a deep voice he cried out, "Divine healing!" A huge 2-meter-wide pillar of light descended from the sky, completely enveloping the Grand Elder, who was on the bed. It worked with the essence blood of the soaring centipede, purging the poison in the Grand Elder's body. The situation lasted for an hour, before the giant pillar of light finally disappeared. The president opened his eyes as he would normally, and looked towards the Grand Elder on the bed with concern. How is it? Has the poison been completely purged? At this current moment, the Grand Elder had a healthy glow. He seemed to be energetic and brimming with vitality, as if he was a completely different person altogether, when compared to his previous ill complexion. The Grand Elder sat up in the end, and revealed an expression of joy from recovering from the illness. He said, "The poison that's bothered me for so many years is finally gone. Soaring centipede poison really is strong. No wonder it's ranked second among all the poisons. Unless there was the essence blood, even Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters would not have been able to cure me. Congratulations on the Grand Elder making a full recovery." The 5 other Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters all arrived before him, and congratulated him. They all carried unconcealable joy. Radiant Saint Force was unable to rid of such powerful poison. In the past few years, the poison in the Grand Elder's body was forcefully suppressed by 5 Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters with Radiant Saint Force as they took turns, preventing it from spreading. This was the reason why the Grand Elder could survive until today. Grand Elder, you've only just recovered. You should spend a few days to recuperate. The president said. The Grand Elder nodded with a smile. President, although I've spent this period of time in bed, I still know some things about what happened outside. I heard that an unprecedented prodigy appeared in our union not long ago. I have to see him after a few days. Mentioning Yang Yutian, the president could not help but reveal a sliver of happiness. Towards his new disciple, he was extremely satisfied. Last night, Yang Yutian was embroiled in an intense battle. He's overexerted himself, so he might need a few days to recover. Grand Elder, you should first recuperate a little without worrying too much. When Yang Yutian comes out, I'll personally let you go see him. Chapter 748. Coming out of seclusion 2 days later, in a room within the Radiant Saint Master Union headquarters, Jian Chun, who sat on a cushion, slowly opened his eyes. That very moment, a visible spark literally flashed across his eyes and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Shortly afterwards, Jianshan's eyes, which were bright like lanterns, gradually dimmed and recovered to how they were before. After 2 days of recovery, I finally completely recovered from casting God's descent. And I seem to feel that my soul has become stronger. Even my presence has increased from the original 15 kilometers to 20 kilometers. Jianshan mumbled to himself on the cushion. Shortly afterwards, everything that had happened 2 days ago on the ferry flashed past his eyes. It caused Jianshan's neutral expression to become rather cold, and he tightly clenched his 2 hands that were placed on his knees. A vicious sliver of light flashed across his eyes and he growled, 8 clans, I remember what you did that night. I will come looking for you to pay back several-fold one day. It won't be far away. No matter if it was Jianshan or the president of the union, they all knew very well that the black-clothed assassins were people of the 8 clans when around 30 of them attacked the ferry. Jianshan knew even better that it was only the 8 clans attempting to test him, to find out his true strength. Originally, they did not intend to kill him, but when the strength Jianshan demonstrated became stronger and stronger, the people of the 8 clans also felt more and more threatened. This was why they ended up wanting to kill Jianshan. The anger in Jianshan's mind lasted for a while, before finally calming down. He muttered, after that battle 2 days ago, my understanding of radiant arts has increased, especially towards Judgment's sword and God's descent. Although it's not the true thing, I can now cast them with much greater ease. It's the same with the other arts, and their strength have also increased by quite a bit. I've already grasped the method of casting the Radiant Saint Shield very well. Speaking of which, although the defense of the shield I cast that night was quite strong, the Radiant Saint force within did not seem to be able to perfectly meld together. If I can do that, the strength of the shield should increase even more. Although Jianshan was a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, his talent in Radiant Arts directly approached Class 7. As a result, he possessed great talent in practicing the arts. With just his own understanding of the arts, he found many problems and shortcomings very quickly. The day of the competition is getting closer and closer by the day. Although I'm extremely confident that I can defeat all the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, it'll still be quite troublesome for me to fight several dozen Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters working together, unless I expose my strength as a fighter. There's no need for me to get out so quickly, so I'll just continue my seclusion and do some comprehension. When I fix all the problems I've found, my strength as a Radiant Saint Master will definitely improve by quite a lot. Making up his decision, Jianshan immediately closed his eyes and continued his comprehension of radiant arts. In the blink of an eye, a dozen or so days had passed. Currently, there was only half a month left before the competition, and an increase in Radiant Saint Masters in the City of God had appeared. They could be seen almost everywhere, with no lack of azure or blue-badged Radiant Saint Masters. Currently, almost all the high-class Radiant Saint Masters scattered across the Holy Empire, and those from the other 2 capital cities, had gathered in one area. It brought a high to the Union, which happened once every 50 years. Today, the room in which Jianshan had gone into seclusion slowly opened. The white-robed Jianshan slowly walked out from inside, and compared to a dozen or so years ago, Jianshan seemed even more ordinary, though he seemed to possess a special air about him. Combined with his snow-white robes, Jianshan carried a sage-like bearing. Just as Jianshan exited the room, a series of soft steps sounded in the distance. It was the white-robed 9th Elder, who walked towards Jianshan with a smile. His gaze towards Jianshan carried unconcealed admiration. Yang Yutian, you've finally come out. Come with me quickly to go see the president. The president has waited for you for several days already. The 9th Elder said warmly. Yes, 9th Elder. Jianshan replied and glanced at Xiao Bai who lay on his shoulder, before quickly following behind the 9th Elder. In the period of seclusion, Jianshan never forgot to feed the white tiger. However, after feeding Xiao Bai a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource 2 days ago, the tiger had fallen asleep. Jianshan understood slightly that perhaps the tiger was about to break through to Class 6. After all, the tiger had stopped at the peak of Class 5 for quite a while already. Yang Yutian, other than seeing the president, there is also the Grand Elder of the Union. Although you're the disciple of the president, you must be respectful in front of the Grand Elder. On the way, the ninth elder said sternly to Jianchen, Yang Yutian understand, Jianchen replied with a soft voice. The ninth elder continued, the Grand Elder is the pillar of support for the Union. He possesses strength only second to the president. Even the vice president is not as strong as the Grand Elder. Ninth elder, just how strong is the Grand Elder? And how strong is Master? Jianchen experienced a wave of curiosity. This question had already dwelled in his mind for a very long time, because he discovered that even though all the elders of the Union were Class 7, there was a great disparity between them. The ninth elder looked at Jianchen and said, Yang Yutian, we primarily use radiant arts to distinguish the strength of Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters. Do you still remember the place where you took the second test? That place is where we accurately test the strength of Radiant Saint Master. You drew over 40% of the Radiant Saint force from the barrier, approaching 50%, so your talent for Radiant Arts was approaching Class 7. You were also much more powerful than regular Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters, because if you want to draw out 50% of the Radiant Saint force in the seal, only Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters, with a sliver of origin energy can do that. As for the 14th Elder and me, we can only draw out 50%, so our strength is still at the 5th level. The 5th Elder that you've seen is much stronger than the 14th Elder and me. He can draw out 60%, and has already reached the 6th level. Then what level has Master reached? Jianchen stared at the 9th Elder in interest. A sliver of admiration appeared in the 9th Elder's eyes. The president is the most powerful person in the entire Union. He has already reached the 10th level. And if not for the untraversable ditch to reaching Class 8, perhaps the president would have reached Class 8 long ago. As for the Grand Elder, he is the second strongest in the Union, only second to the president. He has already reached the 9th level. Below the Grand Elder, there is the vice president, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th elders. They've all reached the 7th level, though I heard that the vice president has almost broken through the 7th level. As for the remaining elders, they are all at the 5th or 6th level. With that, the 9th elder looked towards Jianchen. Jianchen, do you understand how strength is distinguished between Radiant Saint Masters now? Jianchen nodded his head. Then that means that I am currently at the peak of the 4th level, only a step away from the 5th level? Correct. In the competition half a month away, you have to obtain a place in the top 10 no matter what, Yang Yutian, and then enter the Saint Artifact to obtain a sliver of origin energy. Only with that origin energy can you reach Class 7 successfully. As for this energy, it disperses naturally in the world, so it can only be obtained in the Saint Artifact. This is the only way to reach Class 7, but it's not easy to obtain the origin energy. Alright, we're here. Yang Yutian, you should go in. The president and the Grand Elder are currently waiting for you inside. The 9th Elder stopped before the door and did not enter. Jianchen walked in and arrived in a room that was extravagantly decorated. In the center, there was a tea table, and 2 white-robed old men currently sat facing each other, conversing with a smile. One of them was the president of the Union, to no surprise. Jianchen's arrival naturally attracted their attention. The president said to the old man next to him, Grand Elder, this is the genius who's recently appeared, as well as the 3rd disciple I've taken, Yang Yutian. Yang Yutian, this is the Grand Elder of the Union. Why don't you quickly greet the Grand Elder? Yang Yutian greets the Grand Elder. Jianchen immediately bowed towards the old man. After understanding the Grand Elder's strength from the 9th Elder, Jianchen no longer dared to link the old man to regular Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters. This was because there were also huge disparities between Radiant Saint Masters, similar to 1st Heaven Layer and 9th Heavenly Layer Saint Rulers. The difference was extremely huge. The Grand Elder's gaze landed on Jianchen, and he examined him. Shortly afterwards, his expression froze and a certain light flashed across his eyes. He laughed. Not bad at all. He really is a dragon among men. The president chuckled aloud. My disciple's talent is absolutely extraordinary. Not only has he obtained the 3 great radiant arts, he even cast Judgment's sword and God's descent. Although the power of the 2 arts was greatly reduced due to the lack of origin energy, he still discovered a method. This is extremely rare. A sliver of shock immediately flashed across the Grand Elder's eyes. He could not help but closely examine Jian Chun, while the light in his eyes constantly flickered. This was because on Jian Chun, he could feel an extremely weak sliver of the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. Other than him, even the president was unable to sense it, because the sliver of origin energy belonged to him. Chapter 749. The Tsar family's invitation. Yang Yutian, come and sit next to Master. Master does not have much time to live anymore, and can only live for another 100 years. To be able to accept a disciple like you in my remaining life, I can die without regrets. The president was melancholy. He did not have much time left, unless he reached Class 8. Jian Chun sat down beside the president. The president looked at Jian Chun and said, Yang Yutian, other than calling you here to see the Grand Elder, there's something else I need to tell you about. The president's expression slowly became solemn, and he continued, the Tsar family of the City of God has wild ambitions. Not only do they want to absorb the other 2 clans, the Union has also joined their list of things to possess. A few days ago, when the Grand Elder was out traveling, he was injured by a mysterious person. Not only was he heavily poisoned, he also encountered many unknown experts who tried to kill him. In the end, he went through many twists and turns before returning to the City of God, and has only just recovered. I have always suspected that the Tsar family was responsible for this. For now, there is me guarding this place, so they won't go overboard for some time. But after I pass away in 100 years' time, they will probably move against the Union. As for your existence, it possesses as a huge obstacle for the Tsar family. Although they make little of your strength, you will probably reach my current level in 100 years. As a result, the Tsar family will probably move against you. In this period of time, you should stay in the City of God and not go traveling. In the city, we can ensure your safety at all times. Jian Chun became slightly heavy-hearted. He said, Yes, Master, disciple understands. All right, I've told you what I need to tell you. You can go and properly prepare for the competition in half a month's time. You have to place within the top 10. Only by reaching Class 7 can you pose a threat to Saint Kings. Although the price will be quite big, this is the only way you can handle Saint Kings. The president waved his hand and dismissed Jian Chun. Jian Chun stood up and bowed towards the president before leaving. Just as Jian Chun left, the Grand Elder looked towards the president. President, you don't have much time left. We need to increase our pace with the plan. Once you reach Class 8, our Radiant Saint Master Union will greatly strengthen. The president sighed gently. He looked at the ceiling and his expression was rather complicated. Ever since the ancient times, there has been no one who has reached Class 8. The past presidents of the Union have thought up countless ideas, and they've all failed. Reaching Class 8 is just too difficult. Also, I have a feeling that perhaps I will never reach Class 8 in this life. No matter what, this is the only chance after all. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. We still have to try it, the Grand Elder said with a soft voice. The battle between the 3 clans will probably begin after the Saint Artifact is activated. Let's proceed with the plan after their battle has subsided. If I fail in the end, I'll use my life as a price and cast the Forbidden Arte to rid the Union of its threat. Determination appeared in the president's eyes. Jian Chun owned his own house in the headquarters. After leaving from where the president was, he had returned to the house and currently, he sat cross-legged on the bed silently, in deep thought. The Tsar family wanted to move against the Union, while he himself had become the greatest obstruction that prevented the Tsar family from gaining control of the Union. He had become one of their targets, soon to be killed. Jian Chun had never anticipated something like this. Currently, the development of the situation had already exceeded what he expected. It's not like anyone knows my true identity. If push comes to pull, I'll just leave the City of God directly after I reach Class 7. I'll just assume my identity as a fighter, and after I possess enough strength, I'll reveal my identity as a radiant saint master to the Tsar family. When that happens, I will possess the power that can even cause dread to the Union. Jianchen thought to himself. At this moment, someone knocked the door outside. Jianchen focused his gaze and immediately stopped thinking. He looked towards the door and said, "Come in." When the door opened, a white-robed old man walked in from outside. It was the Grand Elder of the Union. Jianchen's expression froze. He immediately stood up and bowed courteously. Yang Yutian greets the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder gently closed the door and stared at Jianchen in wonder. Shortly afterwards, he gently waved his hand, and in purple metal immediately flew out from Jianchen's space ring, landing in his hand. The situation immediately surprised Jianchen. The scene of when he first obtained the purple metal quickly flashed across his mind, causing him to become cautious. The Grand Elder gently rubbed the purple metal, while the wonder in his eyes increased. He asked unhurriedly, "Yang Yutian, I wonder where you obtained this metal from." "Grand Elder, this was something I once found on a rotting corpse in a magical beast forest. Perhaps Grand Elder recognizes this item?" Jianchen spoke carefully. However, he stared fixedly at the Grand Elder's expression, observing any changes. In Jianchen's mind, he could not help but think back to the situation when he first obtained the purple metal. The metal was gifted to him by a mysterious old man in a carriage. Jianchen did not see the old man, but instead felt a profound presence from the man. Afterwards, he had guessed at that time the old man was definitely heavily injured from the constant coughing that followed. And now, connecting it with the fact that the Grand Elder had been poisoned a few years ago, Jianchen was almost certain that the old man who had given him the metal was the Grand Elder. If his identity was exposed, the fact that he was a fighter would be exposed too. This was something extremely bad. At least, it was very possible that he would lose the opportunity to reach Class 7. The Grand Elder stared at Jianchen with a forced smile. "Of course I recognize this item. This was originally mine." In the Grand Elder's mind, he slowly thought back to the scene a few years ago. At that time, he was first poisoned, then heavily injured by several experts. In the end, although he repelled the people, he was unable to suppress the speed at which the poison spread throughout his body. He was unable to use Radiant Saint Force to fly, so he concealed his tracks and disguised himself as a merchant, hiring a few mercenaries to escort him. Once he arrived at somewhere safe, he used the communication jade to contact the Union. Afterwards, the president personally came to take him back safely to the City of God. However, during his journey, he met a young man. Although the young man was very weak, he felt that the young man's future would definitely be very great from intuition, a man among dragons. As a result, he left him the purple metal. The metal was something that represented his identity, and also contained a sliver of his Radiant Saint Force origin energy. It was for the future, that if destiny allowed it, when they met again. Right now, not only did the Grand Elder discover the purple metal he had originally given away on Jianchen, he could see the shadow of the young man he had met years ago on Jianchen's face. Jianchen immediately felt rather uneasy. He did not fear the Grand Elder, but rather, he feared that his identity would be exposed, foiling his plans and efforts. "Grand Elder, since this metal belongs to you, let's return it to you today," Jianchen said cautiously, while he stared fixedly at the Grand Elder for any changes in emotion. Although Jianchen currently felt extremely anxious, he seemed calm as ever. Even his gaze when he observed the Grand Elder's expression remained extremely normal. The Grand Elder gently examined the metal before looking at Jianchen. "I gave this away years ago. Since you've obtained it through chance, it means that you are fated to be connected to the metal. It's best if you keep the metal. Although it's not very precious, it contains a sliver of my Radiant Saint Force origin energy inside. Once you reach Class 7, you should have uses for the metal because there are other abilities to it. It can contain some origin energy." The Grand Elder passed the purple metal to Jianchen once again, before striding away. When he arrived at the door, his footstep paused slightly, looking at Jianchen once again. He said, "Yang Yutian, I hope you don't forget the president of the union is your master. The relationship between the two of you may not be very deep, but the president values you very much and has high hopes. And more importantly, he treats you as the future pillar of support for the union. Don't make us disappointed. With that, the Grand Elder walked away. Jian Qin's complexion immediately began to vary. What the Grand Elder said before he left echoed in his mind. He was not sure whether the Grand Elder had realized his identity, but it made Jian Qin constantly ponder what it meant. The next day, a white-robed, middle-aged man found Jian Qin and said, "Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, the patriarch of the Tsar family invites you to visit the clan as a guest." The Tsar family? Hearing that, Jian Qin furrowed his eyebrows slightly. The light in his eyes flickered slightly and he said, "I understand, you can leave." After the middle-aged man left, Jian Qin's complexion immediately became overcast. After pondering slightly, he said, "Although the Tsar family has ill intention towards me, we still haven't reached that step between us. Also, the Tsar family is the true ruler of the city of God, and can't be compared to the 8 clans. Since they have invited me today, they shouldn't try to harm me. If I don't go, perhaps it'll just worsen our relationship ahead of time. Whatever, I guess I have to go. I better tell Master before I go though, just in case." At the same time, in a mountain range several millions of kilometers away, 5 messy-haired old men sat cross-legged in a cave. God damn it, those 4 protectors from the Bloodsword sect really do linger. They've chased us for so long and still aren't willing to let us go. An old man swore angrily. Anger covered his face, while on his body, there was a spine-chilling wound. The 4 protectors possess very powerful baleful force. As soon as they use it against us, we'll die for sure. We can't tangle with them anymore. If this continues, not only will we fail the Tiger King's mission, we'll die to the 4 protectors. We can't drag it out anymore. We need to quickly find Jian Qin. Once we finish the Tiger King's mission, we'll leave here with the 2 other Class 7 monster cores. I have the blood of Jian Qin's parents. Situ, use the blood as a lead to cast the great soothsaying technique. Chapter 750. The Tsar family old man Situ accepted the 2 droplets of blood. Afterwards, he fused the 2 droplets together and placed it in the center of his eyebrows. As soon as the blood droplet came in contact with his brow, it disappeared immediately. Old man Situ closed his eyes. A while later he suddenly opened them, and a dazzling gleam of light exploded in his eyes. He yelled deeply, "With my soul as the path and the blood as the lead, with the energy of the world, the great soothsaying technique." A red light shot out from between his eyebrows. Under the control of old man Situ's mind, it drew an extremely mysterious blood-red image. Profound chi of the mysteries of the world flowed about the image, and shortly afterwards, it turned into a dark red 5-pointed star, disappearing back into old man Situ's forehead. The great soothsaying technique was special. It was discovered by the 5 of them in the cave of a Saint King several hundred years ago. All 5 of them had tried comprehending it, but only old man Situ grasped some of the bare basics of the technique. The great soothsaying technique was not used to attack. It was used to forecast the future, a technique similar to divining. However, old man Situ's comprehension of the great soothsaying technique was still at a beginner's level, only able to utilize some of the basics. This included searching for certain people throughout the boundless continent with the use of some special equipment or items. Old man Situ shut his eyes tightly. His rosy complexion paled at a rate visible with the naked eye. He stayed like this for 15 minutes, before snapping open an eyes. "City of God, the Holy Empire. Let's go to the Holy Empire immediately. Otherwise, the 4 protectors from the Bloodsword sect will come looking for us soon. The hiding technique we got from that Saint King cave is useless against the 4 of them." Old man Matting said with a deep voice, "This cannot be delayed. Move out immediately." In the depths of the Cross Mountains concealed a huge palace, known to exist by few. At this moment, a burly, fierce-looking middle-aged man currently sat on the cold floor within a decorated room. His complexion was overcast. He was one of the 2 kings of the Gilligan clan, the Tiger King. My strength has fallen from the second heavenly layer to the first as a Saint King, and I can't recover it in a short period of time. Stepping out of the depths of the mountains this time has actually made me pay such a heavy price. The Tiger King clenched his fists tightly as he gnashed his teeth in anger. My strength might have decreased, but if I can complete the ruler's mission, everything is worth it. The ruler will definitely not mistreat me. A sliver of interest flashed across his eyes and he continued. The growth of the winged tiger god's a little unexpected. I can't drag this out for too long, or else once the winged tiger god really does become powerful, it'll be hard to deal with. I wonder if Old Man Situ's group is successful or not. I'll give them another month, and if they don't succeed in that time, I can only report the developments to the ruler. A sliver of determination flashed across the Tiger King's eyes. At this very moment, a white-robed, middle-aged scholar suddenly appeared in the room. He stared at the Tiger King with a complicated expression. Is it really worth it? The winged tiger god is the god of the beast race, and is paramount. Only under its leadership did our beast race become so prosperous. The ruler is already committing a monstrous crime by doing things like this. The Tiger King stared coldly at the middle-aged scholar and said expressionlessly, Pung King, we the beast race only needs the existence of the ruler to be prosperous. The current times is not like the ancient age where experts were as common as forests. Before us, the beast god continent, the Tianyuan continent is too weak to put up a fight. Tiger King, you must not underestimate the experts of the Tianyuan continent. On the continent, there are also humans who can fight against the ruler. The scholar said. The Tiger King sneered, and a sliver of disdain appeared in his eyes. Are you talking about that traitor of the pure cleansing heart pavilion? That person who spends his days in the 7 emotions and 6 desires? How is he the ruler's opponent? Tiger King, the news of the winged tiger god has already been received by the ancestor of my Pung clan on the beast god continent. There is still time for you to turn back. The scholar said. Looks like your Pung clan has chosen to stand with the winged tiger god. I must persuade you. There's still time for you to change your time. Otherwise, once the ruler successfully obtains the winged tiger god, your Pung clan will be facing a devastating calamity. The Tiger King replied coldly. Hearing that, the scholar sighed gently. He did not say anything else, as his figure slowly disappeared from the room. In the Holy Empire, there was a luxurious carriage bearing the symbol of the Radiant Saint Master Union, rolling down the wide streets of the City of God. Within the carriage, the white-robed Jianshan sat with the small white tiger on his lap, eyes closed, resting. Beside him was his bodyguard Yang Ling. The heavy injuries sustained by Yang Ling back on the ferry had been healed personally by an elder of the Union, so he had already fully recovered. Currently, he sat coldly within the carriage, silently protecting Jianshan. In the jolting carriage, Jianshan slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Yang Ling and said, Mr. Yang Ling, I wonder how long has it been since you reached the 6th cycle as a Heaven Saint Master? Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, Yang Ling has already stopped at the 6th cycle for close to a century. Yang Ling replied emotionlessly, but in his gaze towards Jianshan, it contained unconcealed respect. A century? Jianshan mumbled to himself in shock. That was around 4 times his current age. Yang Ling, I believe that you'll break through and reach Saint Ruler without much more time. Jianshan said with a smile. Currently, Yang Ling held a status vastly different from before in his heart. Yang Ling's expression became gloomy. How would it be so easy to reach Saint Ruler? There's so many people on the Tianyuan continent, as well as quite a few prodigies. But just how many of them become Saint Rulers? Jianshan paused for a while. Mr. Yang Ling, if I get the chance in the future, I want to find a method to help you out. Hearing that, Yang Ling's interest was piqued, as a gleam of light flashed across his eyes. A sliver of joy appeared in the depths of his eyes. To him, what Jianshan had said meant that he would ask for a Saint Ruler to come and direct him after he had reached Class 7. The luxurious carriage rolled through the large streets of the city, before finally stopping before a grand manor. The manor was extremely large. Although it was not as grand as the headquarters of the Union, It radiated with a thick, ancient presence, as if the manor was not a manor, but rather an old man who had lived for countless years and experienced the changings of time. It could deeply affect the mood of people. At the main entrance to the manor, 10 silver-armored guards stood like statues, without moving at all. Each of them possessed the strength of an Earth Saint Master. Above the main entrance hung a huge plaque high up above. 2 words were written elegantly on the plaque. Tsar family. Here was the #1 clan of the City of God, as well as one of the 3 great clans that controlled the Holy Empire, the Tsar clan. It was an owner of one of the 7 capital cities on the continent. Are you perhaps Master Yang Yutian? Just as Jianchen dismounted from the carriage, an ancient voice echoed from within the manor. A blue-robed old man walked out from inside. His tone was warm, without any arrogance, while his 2 eyes flickered with a wise light, constantly examining Jianchen. Jianchen clasped his eyes at the old man. I am indeed Yang Yutian. I have come to visit under the esteemed patriarch's request. The old man chuckled. This old servant, the secondary caretaker of the Tsar clan, greets Master Yang Yutian. Master Yang Yutian, the patriarch is already waiting in the main hall. Please come along with me. Then I'll be troubling the caretaker to lead the way. Jianchen's actions and words were learned and refined. He was not arrogant or reckless, not humble or pushy. Even though he had come to the greatest clan in the City of God, he remained unperturbed, calm as ever. Witnessing this, the secondary caretaker could not help but nod secretly in his mind. This Yang Yutian really is something else. Jianchen and Yang Ling followed the caretaker into the Tsar family. Afterwards, they passed through various rooms under the caretaker's lead, before finally arriving in the central majestic hall. At the very end of the hall sat a middle-aged man in purple and gold robes. He was the patriarch of the Tsar clan, and beneath him, various people of different ages sat in 2 rows. Jianchen stood in the center of the hall and clasped his hands at the middle-aged man in ease. Yang Yutian greets the patriarch. A gleam of light flashed across the patriarch's eyes. He closely observed Jianchen, before slowly revealing the sliver of a smile on his face. I have heard that Master Yang Yutian's talent is unprecedented, and was also accepted as the Union President's 3rd disciple long ago. Seeing you today, Brother Yang Yutian indeed is a dragon among men. Please sit. The Tsar family patriarch did not act pretentious at all, receiving Jianchen in a way where they were completely equal. This was because the Tsar family patriarch knew very well that the Tsar family and the Radiant Saint Master Union were basically existences of the same level. His status as the patriarch in the Tsar family was not even as great as Jianchen's status in the Radiant Saint Union. The patriarch of the Tsar clan was not someone who held power, but was only a spokesman. He was basically a caretaker, completely abiding to his master's orders, as well as handling some everyday household chores. Chapter 751. The Grand Elder of the Tsar family. In the Tsar family, the patriarch was only a spokesperson. Although he possessed some status, he did not possess much power, and could not really make decisions crucial to the Tsar family. Once something major happened, or if they needed to do something major, the patriarch would need to report to the elders which stand above. The elders of the Tsar family were split into 2 groups. The internal elders of the Tsar family are all senior members of the clan, people who possess power to do things. If their opinions come to agreement, they can essentially determine all crucial things of the Tsar family, as well as control all movements of the clan. As for the external elders, they were formed from a few experts of the Tsar family, as well as people who were invited from elsewhere. These outer elders possessed a certain status and could enjoy generous treatments from the clan, but they did not really possess any power. Jianchen had learned about these groups of the Tsar clan from the president of the Union before he had come. This was why he had some rough understandings as to how the largest clan in the City of God functioned. Jianchen sat down in an empty seat to the side. Afterwards, he conversed with the people sitting in the hall slightly, and after a series of exchanges and introductions, Jianchen also learned that all the people sitting in the hall were part of the high-ranking management of the Tsar family. Just at this moment, The patriarch's expression became serious. He stared at Jian Chun with keen eyes and said, Master Yang Yutian, this time inviting you to our Tsar family as a guest is actually because we have something important we want to discuss with Master Yang Yutian. Hearing that, Jian Chun understood that they had finally reached the main topic of conversation. His expression also became slightly stern and said with his hands clasped, I wonder what the patriarch has to discuss with me? The patriarch smiled. Unprecedented prodigies like Master Yang Yutian are admirable to all of our inner elders. For this, our elders even held a discussion together and decided in the end that they hope Master Yang Yutian can become an internal elder of my Tsar clan and enjoy the power and status. I wonder how Master Yang Yutian feels about it? After he finished what he was saying, the patriarch stared fixedly at Jian Chun. Slivers of anticipation appeared in the depths of his eyes. I must thank the Tsar family for their great kindness, but I've already become a core member of the Radiant Saint Master Union, and the president's even taken me as his disciple. If I join your Tsar family now, it might be rather inappropriate. Jian Chun said at ease. He did not care at all whether his decision would offend the Tsar family or not. Master Yang Yutian, you must think this through. This is the first time ever since the founding of the clan that my Tsar family is allowing a person who is not a part of the family become an internal elder by inviting you. My Tsar family really views you with importance. The Tsar family patriarch explained. Jian Chun said apologetically, Patriarch, I really must apologize. Unless I gain Master's consent, it'll be extremely difficult for me to become an internal elder of the Tsar family. Hi. The patriarch sighed gently and no longer said anything. Suddenly, his expression changed and revealed a sliver of respect before quickly recovering. He said to Jian Chun, Master Yang Yutian, the Grand Elder wishes to see you. Please come with me. With that, the patriarch directly exited the hall. A light of interest flickered in Jian Chun's eyes as he hesitated slightly. Shortly afterwards, he followed up behind the patriarch closely, while his bodyguard Yang Ling was kept back in the hall. Following the patriarch, Jian Chun traveled towards the back courtyard without any obstructions. Within the clan, Jian Chun did not see any patrolling guards, but instead felt several strong presences. They were all at least Earth Saint Masters, even with some Heaven Saint Masters in between. When Jian Chun walked past a grand hall, he had even felt the presence of a Saint Ruler. A Saint Ruler who had already reached the third heavenly layer. Jian Chun knew that all the strength he had seen was only the tip of the iceberg for the Tsar family. To be able to occupy the city of God, as well as have one of the 8 great kingdoms as a subsidiary nation, the Tsar family definitely had much more than this little bit of power. Jian Chun followed behind the patriarch, entering a palace in the back of the clan. Finally, they stopped in a guest room, and in the center of the room, a ruddy old man sat next to a table, drinking tea at leisure. The old man wore white robes, while his white hair was tied into a bun on his head. He gave off an ancient feeling around him, and seemed slightly sage-like. I greet the Grand Elder. The patriarch bowed towards the old man with an expression of respect. You can go, the Grand Elder said expressionlessly, without even looking at the patriarch. Yes, sir. Before the Grand Elder, the patriarch of the family seemed to show great respect. He bowed deeply towards the Grand Elder again, before backing off with gentle steps. After the patriarch left, the Grand Elder finally raised his head. His gaze landed on Jian Chun, and he said with a dull voice, You're Yang Yutian? Jian Chun clasped his hands, but just when he wanted to speak, his expression suddenly changed. The Grand Elder began to give off an invisible force, like a mountain, forcefully pushing down on Jian Chun. It caused Jian Chun to lose all mobility, and even his 2 legs bowed slightly, forcing him down to kneel on the ground. You still don't have the right for me to kneel. Flames of anger exploded in Jian Chun's heart. In that very moment, his gaze became sharp, and a light exploded in his eyes. The surrounding radiant saint force quickly gathered towards him, forming a silvery armor that clad every inch of his body at lightning speed. It radiated with a dazzling white light, resisting the great pressure. With the formation of the radiant saint armor, The pressure on Jian Chen's body suddenly lessened by a lot. His bent legs immediately straightened out, and his gaze towards the Grand Elder also increased in hostility. This Grand Elder should be at least a 6th heavenly layer saint ruler, Jian Chen thought to himself. However, he did not feel any fear at all. A sliver of interest flashed across the Grand Elder's eyes. He gazed towards Jian Chen, now carried an additional hint of admiration, and the invisible force given off by him abruptly increased. Jian Chen began to tremble violently. His legs, which he had just straightened out, began to bend again. In that moment, he felt like the thing above him was not a mountain, but a metal mountain, a mountain entirely made from metal. Crack! A crack appeared on Jian Chen's radiant Saint Master armor. Shortly afterwards, the crack began to expand, slowly covering every inch of the armor before finally breaking, turning into dust and disappearing. Jian Chen clenched his jaw and forced all the chaotic force in his body back into the chaotic Nidan to hide it. At this very moment, it was extremely easy to expose his secret as a fighter. In order to prevent any accidents, he gave up on the idea of using his chaotic body to resist it. God's protection! Jian Chen cried out with a deep voice, and cast the only defensive arte of the 3 great radiant arts. Immediately, the surrounding radiant saint force began to gather around Jian Chen at an unbelievable speed. Although the Grand Elder had restricted Jian Chen's movements, he was unable to stop Jian Chen from casting radiant arts, as radiant saint force was not something fighters could control. God's protection? Who would have thought that you've even grasped this radiant arte? Looks like you know all 3 great radiant arts from the Radiant Saint Master Union. The Grand Elder muttered to himself softly, while he carried some shock on his face. God's protection was gathering the radiant saint force in the surroundings and pouring it into the body, allowing the body to become like metal. It did not have any consequential effects either. The vast radiant saint force poured into Jian Chen without any indication of stopping, before finally all fusing with his body. It caused Jian Chen to radiate with a vague white light all over, and the strength of his body began to increase at an unbelievable pace. Although it was far from the chaotic body in toughness, it was the strongest defensive arte for the weak bodies of radiant saint masters. Jian Chen's defense constantly increased. As the powerful radiant saint force surged about in his body, it blocked the pressure from the Grand Elder, and his bent legs began to straighten out slowly once again. The Grand Elder revealed a weird light in his eyes and muttered, "Not bad, not bad." As he said those 4 words, the pressure Jian Chen was under abruptly increased by several fold, completely suppressing all the light Jian Chen shone with from God's protection. As for where Jian Chen was standing, a crack had appeared, and constantly began to expand. His 2 feet gradually sank 3 inches into the ground. A sliver of determination appeared in Jian Chen's eyes. He slowly closed them and raised his arms with difficulty, forming a weird seal before his chest. Witness that, the Grand Elder's pupils suddenly constricted. He remembered that it was the hand seal for casting the forbidden arte, God's Descent. I definitely can't let him cast God's Descent. Although it's not the real thing and cannot harm me at all. The great disturbance caused by it will alert the people in the Union. The Grand Elder thought, before immediately withdrawing the pressure. With the wave of a hand, a gentle force forcefully knocked away the hand seal formed by Jian Chen. He laughed. "Please do not get angry, Master Yang Yutian. Before, I was only testing Brother Yang Yutian's strength, and did not have any other intentions. If I have offended you in any shape or form, I wish that Master Yang Yutian can forgive me." Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes. Although he knew that the Grand Elder was testing him, it really made him angry. "I wonder why the Grand Elder has called me here," Jian Chen said coldly. He was not polite at all. Perhaps the Grand Elder understood that what he did before was a little too much, but he did not pay too much attention to Jian Chen's attitude. He laughed. "Master Yang Yutian really is straightforward. All right, I'll get to the point. Master Yang Yutian, I want you to join my Tsar family and become an internal elder of the clan. The Patriarch has already raised this topic. I will probably be disappointing the Grand Elder." Jian Chen's tone was rather icy. The Grand Elder continued, "Master Yang Yutian, I'll be honest. The president of the Radiant Saint Master Union only has 100 years left. Once those 100 years pass, the Radiant Saint Master Union will fall under my Tsar family. If you join my Tsar family as an internal elder, I can promise you that my Tsar clan can give you full authority of the Radiant Saint Master Union, with you as the president and my Tsar family as a powerful supporter. Master Yang Yutian, there is no harm in consider it. The Grand Elder did not hide anything from Jianshin. Although the whole matter of absorbing the Radiant Saint Master Union could be considered a secret, it was no longer a secret among the larger clans of the City of God. Also, the Grand Elder knew even better that the president of the Union had already become aware of the Tsar family's wild ambitions long ago, so telling this secret to Jianshin would not affect the plans of the clan at all. Chapter 752. Assassination on the Open Streets. Although Jianshin knew about the wild ambitions of the Tsar family, he had never thought that the Grand Elder would tell him about it so directly. This made him stunned. However, he knew that the reason why the Tsar family wanted him to join them was to gain control of the Radiant Saint Master Union through him. If they could do that, not only would they gain control of the Union without shedding any blood, they would also gain an expert as strong as the president of the Union, allowing their strength to greatly increase. However, with Jianshin's personality, he definitely would not become a chess piece in other people's hands. He clasped his hands at the Grand Elder. Grand Elder, I must thank the clan's good intentions, but Yang Yutian will perhaps be disappointing you. The Grand Elder's gaze immediately began to sharpen, staring at Jianshin fixedly with his two eyes, like two unsheathed sharp swords. He raised his voice. Yang Yutian, are you still unwilling to become an internal elder of the clan? Yes. Jianshin looked into the Grand Elder's eyes. He did not show any fear at all. The two stared at each other fixedly, as if their gazes were sparks colliding mid-air. This lasted for a while, before the Grand Elder finally retracted his gaze. He sighed gently. Whatever. Since you're so determined, I will not force you. Yang Yutian, you can leave. Jianshin left silently. Only the Grand Elder was left in the room, sitting there drinking tea, just like how he was before. What a pity, it's really a pity. He's such a prodigy, but not of any use to my Tsar family. A long while later, the Grand Elder gave out a soft sigh. Shortly afterwards, a piece of jade appeared in his hand, which his hand crushed without any hesitation. At the same time, in the 8 clans, the expressions of those in control all changed. They all pulled out a piece of broken jade in their space rings. Do it! Walking out from the Grand Elder's building, the patriarch that had brought him there had already disappeared. Jianshin could only go back to the conference hall using his memory. Jianshin arrived at the hall without any obstructions. There, he saw that all the high-ranking members of the Tsar family had left. Other than the 2 guards in the hall, there was just Yang Ling, who sat there all by himself. A gleam of light flashed across Jianshin's eyes. In his heart, he already understood that the way the Tsar family treated him was vastly different from before. He said, Mr. Yangling, let's go. Yangling stood up and walked out of the empty hall. With a cold expression, he followed behind Jianshin and silently walked towards the main entrance of the Tsar family. No one came out to see them off, much less urge them to stay. Return to the headquarters. Jianshin and Yangling boarded the carriage as Jianshin said to the horse driver. The luxurious carriage bearing the symbol of the Union turned around and directly traveled towards the headquarters. In the carriage, Jianshin sat with his head down in thought, while the light in eyes constantly flickered. As for Jianshin, he remained expressionless, sitting to one side coldly with his eyes closed resting. Not only have I rejected the offer of becoming an internal elder, I've also learnt from the Grand Elder of the Tsar family's future plans from this trip to the Tsar family. It's already put me in a position against the Tsar family in some sense. This Tsar family will definitely move against me. I need to be more careful in this period of time. Jianshin thought to himself. He did not fear the 8 clans, but he needed to be cautious against the Tsar family. After all, the Tsar family was powerful existence akin to an ancient clan. I need to quickly reach Class 7. Once I become a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master, I can leave this place. And I won't need to care about the matters between the Tsar family and the Radiant Saint Master Union. Jianchen thought to himself. However, he thought of what the Union Grand Elder has said to him in the very end shortly afterwards. Yang Yutian, I hope you don't forget the president of the Union is your master. The relationship between the two of you may not be very deep, but the president values you very much and has high hopes. And more importantly, he treats you as the future pillar of support for the Union. Don't make us disappointed. Thinking up to that, a sliver of hesitation appeared on Jianchen's face. Just at this moment, the carriage Jianchen was in began to shake violently. It began to quickly decelerate from its original speed, while a noisy hubbub erupted outside shortly afterwards. Yang Ling, who sat beside Jianchen and was resting, abruptly opened his eyes and with a flash, he exited the carriage. As for Jianchen, he sat still in the carriage. He had already observed the outside situation clearly with his presence. At this moment, Yang Ling entered the carriage again. He said, Master Yang Yutian, the carriage was too fast and an accident occurred. A child's been hit. Let's go and have a look, Jianchen said expressionlessly. Afterwards, he left the carriage together with Yang Ling. He saw that there was a skinny small girl, roughly 11 or 12 years old, fainted on the ground. Her forehead was wounded, and fresh blood dyed her entire face. She wore inexpensive clothes, clearly not someone wealthy. Beside the girl knelt an average-looking, middle-aged woman in simple clothes, crying aloud. Daughter, my daughter, nothing must happen to you. I only have you, my one daughter. If anything happens to you, how can I continue to live? Seeing this, Jianchen furrowed his eyebrows slightly. With a gaze of blame, he stared at the horse driver and said, How did you do this? The old man who drove the horses paled slightly and said with a trembling voice, Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, the girl was mischievous. She ran into the center of the road. Sir, please save this little girl. This little girl is so pitiful. Sir, you can just watch her die. Sir, this pitiful girl was hit by your carriage. You have to save her. There were a lot of passers-by on the street. Very soon, many people gathered in the surroundings, all speaking to Jianchen. At this moment, the mother of the girl was already on the ground, begging Jianchen on her hands and knees. She said, Sir, I only have one daughter. She's my lifeblood. I beg you, please save my daughter. If something happens to my daughter, then I don't even want to live anymore. Jianchen helped the woman to her feet and said softly, Miss, don't worry. I will definitely save your daughter. With that, Jianchen directly knelt down to where the unconscious girl was. Blood constantly flowed from the girl's head, which had already formed a small pool on the ground. Jianchen stared at the girl's forehead injury for a while an ineffable light flashed across his eyes. Afterwards, he slowly raised his right hand, and a ball of soft radiant saint force slowly gathered around it. The radiant saint force was not gentle, but it carried a certain sharp intent that could only be felt by other radiant saint masters. At that moment, changes began to happen. The mother of the girl gently raised her left hand and placed it on Jianchen's back. Immediately, a cold qi began to surge violently from the woman's palm, entering Jianchen's body. At the same time, a dagger had appeared soundlessly in the woman's right hand, slashing at Jianchen's neck with lightning speed. Everything happened in a flash, without any prior signs. It completely dazed the onlooking bystanders in the surroundings. Be careful, Yang Ling's pupils constricted, and his gaze immediately became a glare. He yelled aloud to warn Jianchen, and then shot towards the woman like a lightning bolt. Even though Yang Ling was a heaven saint master, the woman was just too close to Jianchen. Also, the woman had struck out extremely fast, so Yang Ling was unable to go up and help out in time. Just as the woman was about to cut Jianchen's throat with the dagger, there was a flash of light, which actually pierced the center of the woman's eyebrows with a speed several-fold faster than the dagger. It was actually the radiant saint force that Jianchen had gathered in his hand, which was turned into a raindrop-sized ball of light in an instant and shot out. The dagger stopped around 3 inches from Jianchen's throat. Between the woman's eyebrows, a bloody hole had already appeared. At this moment, Yang Ling also arrived. He struck a palm clad with powerful saint force directly and mercilessly at the woman's back. The woman was immediately sent flying far away. At the same time, the unconscious girl on the ground snapped open her eyes. She opened her small mouth slightly, and a sharp weapon, the size of a sewing needle, shot out from her mouth, directly piercing towards the center of Jian Chen's eyebrows. A light exploded from Jian Chen's eyes. Just when the needle-like weapon from the mouth of the girl was 3 inches away from him, it stopped and slowly fell into his hand under the control of his mind. Surprisingly, it was a finger-sized blade. The blade was completely black, clearly containing poison. Jian Chen stared at the small blade fixedly, while his eyes became brighter and brighter. "You're looking to die." Yang Ling was immediately angered. Vast saint force exploded from his fist, which he threw mercilessly towards the girl on the floor. The girl remained calm. She directly leapt up from the ground and put her palms together, keeping them open slightly. Surging saint force gathered, and it collided forcefully with Yang Ling's fist. Boom! With a muffled sound, the surging energy ripples exploded in where the girl and Yang Ling had clashed. It caused the ground to crack. Yang Ling's expression changed slightly. He staggered back a few steps and stared at the girl who seemed to only be 12 or 13. He cried out, "Sixth cycle Heaven Saint Master." Suddenly, a dozen or so of the bystanders rushed in. In their hands were daggers, which they used to stab at Jian Chen. "Master Yang Yutian, be careful, they're assassins." Yang Ling yelled aloud. His expression became stern and a huge, completely red sword appeared in his hand. He rushed directly at the people. Of the dozen or so assassins, 6 of them stopped to obstruct Yang Ling, while the remaining people rushed at Jian Chen. Each of them had cold gazes, but did not even carry a sliver of killing intent. Jian Chen finally looked away from the small blade. He stared at the assassins that rushed towards him with calmly, while the corner of his lips curled into a sneer. He mumbled softly, "Whatever, I might as well test out the strength of my arts." Since the battle on the ferry, Jian Chen had spent a dozen or so days in the headquarters to continue his comprehension of radiant arts, which greatly increased the strength of his arts. Radiance burst. Jian Chen muttered with a low voice. The surrounding radiant saint force immediately began to gather quickly around him. This time, the speed at which it gathered was several times faster than before. In that very moment, Jian Chen's surroundings was full of countless glowing raindrops. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.